Hey folks, welcome back to Chris Wyatt's channel with a new segment. Let's see how this goes. Called the Braai Brus. I've got the braai fried up outside. I don't think I'll be able to share that very easily with Byron, though. There's a bit of physical distance between us, but it's probably a better braai time for him. Evening braai. Byron, how's it going?
Not too bad. How are you?
Another day, a couple more shekels in the bank. Well, probably less after the government takes their share. But yeah, crazy stuff. You're back in South Africa. That's good to see. Safely ensconced back down there. You survived the national shutdown, or as I prefer to call it, the EFF's national letdown. How was that from your perspective?
Wet squid. Nothing happened. We predicted nothing would happen.
A damp squib. Yeah, that's exactly what it was, a damp squib. It was pretty lame to say the very least. It's in your area, was there anything at all? I mean, we did see some video of the EFF marching down along the beach in there in Port Elizabeth, but didn't really seem to be much, even many people at all.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the situation was in Port Elizabeth, because EFF weren't really a thing here. I think they tried to do something, and then I think it got blixemed. I think basically the police came out here and blixemed them, and that was the end of it.
Well, did you see the latest with Julius Malema and the EFF? They're now championing gay rights, interfering in the affairs of Uganda's domestic affairs, and led a march with, I think, at least 225 people showed up for it as Malema's championed gay rights up there. That apparently is the hill he wants to die on. I've mentioned three strikes here. The first was his support for open borders in an incredibly xenophobic country like South Africa, where people are suffering from massive unemployment. Probably not a winning pitch. Then he does the national shutdown, which proves to be a damn squib. That's number two. And now he's coming out in favor of something that, in consistent surveys throughout South Africa, 90% of South Africans are better oppose gay marriage, let alone homosexuality. I don't think these are winning arguments for the EFF. What do you think?
I don't really know why they've taken this approach, to be honest. It's a real concern, in that I don't think they really know where they stand anymore. The problem that the EFF has is obviously the national shutdown was meant to give them relevance. And the problem is they had no relevance. So the problem now they have is like, okay, so what do we champion next? Because they need to go to a cause. They need to be seen to be relevant. Otherwise, they're not going to get any headlines, right? So the only kind of way for them to get any headlines is to jump on what they think is the kind of the current relevant thing. And as you know, the relevant thing for everybody to talk about at the moment is LGBT, whatever.
Well, it may be the relevant thing on social media, but as far as the political scene in South Africa, it's not a winning proposition, is my argument. It's just not going to fly. It's not going to happen. No, they are searching for relevance. That's what I said. That was one of my big arguments. When we talked about this before they had their march, this whole thing was a search for relevance, because it had no relevance. This party is headed to single figures in 2024. Just how far they fall is a question. I'm not going to say they're going to get 5%, but I wouldn't be surprised to see the EFF coming at 8.9% of the vote in next year's election. I think that might be a ceiling for them.
No, I actually think that the ceiling was even lower than that.
Well, there you go.
I haven't really. I don't know if that's going to be the case, because all the by-elections now coming out of KZN are showing something different. So the KZN by-elections, they've had quite a few. The statistics are showing that the amount of the vote that they're getting is around, I don't know, 2 or 3 votes in some elections. So the actual percentage that they're getting is 0.0001%. So they've actually had quite a few elections just this week.
Well, that's going to be a little bit concerning for the EFF.
Yeah, I think so.
If they're actually paying attention to what's going on here, they seem to be missing the moment. This is not the moment. You know, they thought they had the moment at Brockenfell. They thought they had the moment at Senecal, and they were wrong in both instances. Although they got a lot of press from a fawning media that fell all over their actions. They thought they had a winning argument when they basically committed domestic terrorist acts against cliques. That didn't win them the day. In fact, all these actions, I would argue, over time, over the past 2 and 3 years, have really weakened their appeal. And we saw that. They didn't do particularly well in the municipal elections. They pretty much held steady, didn't go anywhere, didn't pick anything up. And when they had an opportunity to actually govern at a municipality in the Free State, because the ANC sided with them. They had the two largest groupings, and they had a chance to have the mayor. They elected a mayor from the EFF. The EFF told her to resign rather than be in a coalition with the ANC. And here we are a year later, and they're trying to build coalitions with the ANC in Ekurhuleni, in Joburg, in Tshwane, to overthrow mayors to pick another party. This is I'd say, schizophrenic party at best. They really don't know what they're doing. I don't think they want to govern, and the proof in the pudding is that they refuse to take a mayoral position when they've earned it.
Yeah, so Ekurhuleni is a good example today. So Ekurhuleni was supposed to have the swearing in of some various councillors. I'm sure you know about that. And the problem is it was meant to be like 5 councillors here and 5 councillors here. So it's 5 EFF, 5 ANC. The EFF members turned up to get it all done, and the Ekurhuleni, the ANC people didn't.
I guess that didn't go quite the way people were expecting it to go.
Yeah, so the ANC people didn't turn up. That's the MMC positions. They didn't turn up, and
there you have it.
I've been sworn in, mate.
All right, well, the big news over this past weekend, of course, was the Democratic Alliance held their convention, Congress, and they elected a slate of leadership and discussed their platform, or as John Steenhuisen prefers to call it in the lingo of South Africa, the commie lingo of manifesto, their manifesto going forward. They also announced this moonshot coalition, which has been greeted rather tepidly by the African Christian Democratic Party, the Freedom Front Plus. Action SA has said they'll go along with it, at least initially, but it seems confusing. The statements come from Michael Beaumont, the chairman in that structure. So any thoughts or any comments? Did you see any of what happened? I mean, it's kind of glitzy. It's like a rock star thing. It's like watching the Democrats, Republicans hold a convention. But other than that, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm going to give you a few of those. I'm actually going to be a little bit rude. I've just got one person trying to get hold of me for work. I'm actually still at work.
Yep.
Can I just take this quickly? I don't want to
turn your camera off.
Discuss it on the.
I'll keep people. Cool. I'll keep people going.
Yes.
All right, thanks, folks. So Byron's got to step off for a moment. Sorry about that. Yeah, so did any of you actually watch the DA Congress? I saw parts of it. Well, it was pretty good. Not bad. But we'll see what goes forward after this, what's going to happen, whether parties actually come along to the concept that the Democratic Alliance is calling the moonshot approach to form a grand rainbow coalition to unseat the African National Congress in 2024. Is this the last chance for South Africa? I don't know. Honestly, I kind of thought the last chance for South Africa was in 2021, and things have got progressively worse. Kind of disappointing to say the very least. The very least. Anyway, so let me go ahead and put him in the waiting room. Hang on a second here. That way. So I'll put him in the waiting room. That way you can see me a little bit better here. So sorry, I'm eating some licorice here. I'm kind of hungry. I haven't eaten today, and it's getting to me. I'm going to say hello to everybody here. We'll wait for Byron to come back to take care of some business. Ants is here. John Hinge is here. Dylan Comrick, Hendo, Gus, Brian Lawrenson, Taz Girl, Lynn, Sean Mandich, Prodigal Son. Okay, cool beans. And the lady's back. Easter weekend, folks. Yeah, tomorrow night I'll be busy packing Easter eggs and things like that. For the Veterans Reform Warfare Post that I'm a member of. We host an annual Easter egg hunt for kids. It's open to the public, all kids from the local area, and hundreds, if not 1,000 or more kids will show up at this thing sometimes. It's pretty crazy. The last one last year was big, but it wasn't as big as it had been in the past because people are still coming back from the Rona stuff. So we'll see how it is this year. Tomorrow I'll be packing Easter eggs, little plastic Easter eggs full of treats for the kids. And then what we do is we go out and they rope off these areas in a big field next to a tree nursery owned by a local entrepreneur. And then the kids come out there with their parents, and they're done by age cohort. So like the babies up to 2 or something like that, from 2 to 4, and that sort of thing. So, 6 to 8, something like that. And then even up to teenagers. And we let them loose. And there's eggs all over in the field. They run around, pick them up, collect them in their baskets, and then it's all over. It goes really fast, but it is interesting. So it should be pretty cool. Yeah, no. So tomorrow we pack more eggs. We volunteered to help do that. Some have already been packed by people. We do that tomorrow night. And then Saturday morning, we show up at the nursery and we do this. It's really cool. Interesting stuff. So I've got to get there early and make sure we get set up. I would love to videotape this and show it to people, but of course with children involved, people are freaking spasmatics and social media spasmatics. So you can't actually do that. So you can't actually do it anymore. It just doesn't work. So that's something we're just going to have to pass on. It's unfortunate. I got some great footage from last year, but I really can't do anything with it. Whoever thought the moonshot would have me hold up? Yeah, no, it's fun to watch all these kids run around. Yeah, it is pretty cool. But yeah, it's and then parents with their infants even involved. They have a little small one for infants where the parents collect the eggs. It's pretty cool. One of the ways that the Veterans from Foreign Warfare, pays it back to the community. Interesting stuff. So it's, the organization is set up for continued service. No longer serving uniform members ostensibly join it for service. But unfortunately, a lot of people join the Veterans from Foreign Warfare and the American Legion for a different reason. They join because they like the cheap beer. Yeah, both of those organizations have what are known as clubs. And the clubs are places where we have a bar and a restaurant. People can come in and for very reasonable prices get food and drinks and socialize. And pool tables, billiards, dartboards, music, bands come in, that sort of thing. And we have meeting halls and things, and people like to use them for community services. So, yeah, some people join for the wrong reasons. In my view, you should join as a commitment to service, and the other things should be a benefit, a plus on the side. Shouldn't have anything to do with what your desire is, just to go get cheap beer. But I think a lot of people just do it for cheap beer. Important figure is to keep ANC below 40%. Yeah, I agree, Ken. It's 35% would be great. 33% would be ideal. Remember, I predicted 38 to 42%. That was in November of 2021. I'm sticking to that. I haven't changed my position. I am adjusting, saying it could be something else. But I mean, that was my prediction, and I'm going to stick to it. We'll see how close I was. That was a prediction I made in November 2021 after the municipal elections, after I saw the results, and predicting what was likely to happen with load shedding, with corruption, with all malfeasance. So we'll see. But that is a ways off, folks. That is still a ways off. So I intend to be in South Africa during the election, the last days of it, whenever it's announced, presuming it doesn't conflict with my obligations here in the States for consulting and my role as a judge of elections. If it's not interfering with that, then you can expect to see me there, interviewing political candidates, potential voters, traveling around. Should be interesting. Looking forward to it. So, yeah, that's next year. We'll see what will happen there. We will see what happened. But yeah, Easter is this weekend, folks. Tomorrow's Passover, and I think a lot of people are taking a break on social media. A lot of people are not broadcasting. I will be doing rugby broadcasts tomorrow. I've got 2 Curry Cup broadcasts tomorrow while we wait for Byron to come back. Let me see something here. Sorry, I'm just... Oh, I closed. That's right. I just remembered I rebooted my computer, so what I had open is missing now, so I got to go find it. So just a second here. I want to run through all the games that we're covering on Rugby Ascendant this weekend. There we go, Rugby Ascendant. So tomorrow, the first game will be 11. God bless. Tomorrow, the first game will be at 11 Eastern Standard. That's 5 p.m. It's the Blue Bulls versus the Griquas from Loftus Versfeld. I'll be covering that with live color commentary and play-by-play action on Rugby Ascendant. The next game will be at 1 o'clock tomorrow. That's the Sharks at the Shark Pen. Fear of the Fin down there in Durban hosting the Pumas. The Pumas are just killing everybody, so we'll see what the Sharks can do. It'll still be a weakened Shark side, so I expect the Pumas to pull this one away. And then on Saturday, it's the Champions and the Challenge Cup. It's Stade Toulouse versus the Sharks at home, the same guys who beat the Bulls last week. That's 10 o'clock Eastern Standard, 4 o'clock in South Africa, 3 o'clock in UK. Then at 12:30, it's the Exeter Chiefs hosting the DHL Stormers. 12:30 Eastern Standard Time, 5:30 UK, 6:30 South African time. I'm not going to be able to cover the Western Province and Griffins game, folks, because that game I can't get to. Let me just double check on something here. Okay. That game I can't get to because I've got other stuff coming up. So Glasgow and, Western Province Griffins. I can't cover that game because it's 2:25. And that's because I'll be covering the Challenge Cup game where the Lions travel to Glasgow to take on Glasgow, who won 70. They scored 73 points last week. That's at 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, 9 o'clock in South Africa, 8 o'clock in UK. So that's Glasgow. That's Saturday. On Sunday, the Lions in Curry Cup will be playing the Free State Cheetahs at Emirates Park, Ellis Park there in Joburg. And that's 6 games this weekend. Plus, we have the Singapore Sevens. I might do a broadcast Friday night, but probably not. There isn't much interest in Sevens, and the Blitzbox suck right now anyway, so what's the point? Oh, yeah. Super Brew Fleshin. Get on top of that. Yep, get on top of that. So, Byron must be really tied up right now, so we're still waiting for him to come back. Yeah, anyway. Excuse me. So, yeah, let me get to my Super Brew very quick. I only have one window open. That's crazy. Oh, I rebooted. I keep forgetting I rebooted my computer. So there's all the stuff I had open. It's gone now. So let me go take a look at my Super Brew. So also don't forget, if you're in Super Brew and you do Varsity Cup, the quarterfinals are on Monday, or the semifinals, whichever they are. Yeah, no, so my Super Brew picks, looks like I'm okay to do. Yeah, except for the sevens, I got everything else. I got Curry Cup, I got the Champions Cup, I got the Challenge Cup, and yep, Major League Rugby, all picked. Doesn't show, and Monday the Varsity Cup, yeah. So I've picked, for those who are curious, while we're waiting for him to come up, while we're waiting for Byron to come back, let me just get over here. I have picked the Griquas by 3 over the Bulls at Loftus. I picked the Pumas by 5 over the Sharks. Scarlets over Clermont at home by 5. Leinster, wait a second. Leinster by 9 over Leicester. And then in the sevens tournament, there's lots of games there, so that just goes on and on. It's like 16 games, 20 games, so it's not we're not going to go with that. And then I picked Benetton by 5 over Cardiff in the Challenge Cup. I've picked the Sharks to beat Toulouse. That's a big ask. I hope they pull it off for me. And I picked the Stormers to beat Exeter, also a big ask, by 5. So we'll see if I get hurt there or if that pays off for me. In Curry Cup and Major League Rugby, I've got New England Free Jacks over Chicago by 11. And then it's Province and the Griffins. I've got Province by 5 over the Griffins. And then I have the Lions, another hard get, but they've been playing very well in Glasgow. This is an upset here by 3. And in Major League Rugby, it's New York over Toronto by 7. And then at Rugby Atlanta over Old Glory DC by 5. Houston over Utah by 5. And Seattle over San Diego by 5. Those are pretty evenly matched teams. That's why it's pretty tough. Those are my Super Brew picks, though, folks. Let me go to my dashboard real quick. I've played in 25 tournaments, 1,727 caps. Okay. And, yeah, so, all right, there we go. That's where that's at. The Rand Easter Show. LM Radio. Don't know that. Too many people don't vote. It counts. I like playing sport, but watching is not same. Haven't been since it moved from Milner Park. Working at the Rand Show in Joburg and Saturday, taking my mom to the Rand Show on Sunday. What is the Rand Show? What is the Rand Show? I'm not familiar with that. Is it like an agricultural fair or an industrial fair? What's the accurate spread? Locked in, we can go see the bookies. Yeah, there you go. The Rand Easter Show. Yeah, but what is, I get that. I appreciate it's an Easter show, but what does that mean? Is there like Easter Bunny there? Or are there like, Easter egg hunts? Are there businesses, doing displays? What's going on? Hey, it's an agricultural show. That's what I thought it was. That's why I asked. Okay. Yeah, we have the farm show here in Pennsylvania. And they have entertainment. I also have outdoor equipment manufacturers. Can-Am shows up there with their off-road vehicles. Pretty cool stuff. You've got the cowboy action shooters show up. You've got bow hunters. You've got all the arms sellers. Sig Sauer will be there. Mossberg will be there with their shotguns. You'll see Remington. You'll see Colt, Beretta. Really cool stuff. I did that live on the channel a couple years ago, and I don't know how popular it was. Some people liked it. Not everybody tuned in, so I'm not really sure how that went, but it was interesting from my perspective. So, yep. I asked if it was the agricultural show, Howdy Dave. So when I said I don't know, because people didn't say what it was. It's like asking me if I know about the Indaba. Which Indaba? The mining Indaba, the minerals Indaba, the tourism Indaba, the Indaba of the Tswana people. James Bowie says, Happy Passover. Yeah, it is that time. Used to have fireworks, skydivers, live music. Wow, that must have been fun. I like your state fairs, yeah. Thank you, Alan. No, it's the agricultural fair, which is what I was saying. Yep. Best place to shop for knives. Well, I mean, our farm show is a great place to shop for knives, too. Fantastic. Also a great place to go for accessories for firearms, for bow hunting, turkey calls. That's where I got my turkey call. Where's the turkey call at? And my duck whistle, or my duck call, all that stuff. Yeah, remember that? Used to put that on the channel. All that came from the farm show. And then there's all these different organizations. Oh, shoot. Good thing that's closed. Come on. So you got all these different, like these travel places for hunting and lodges and stuff. So That's not what I'm looking for. Oh, I thought these were the ones. These aren't the ones. No, these are different cards. So I thought these were the cards. I have a bunch of cards here from these different camps and lodges in Namibia and in South Africa where people can go for hunting holidays and stuff like that. They all show up at the farm show. It's really cool. So I got to meet a lot of South Africans at the last one I went to. Pretty interesting stuff. Tractor pulls, yeah. Oh, that's cool. We don't do that anymore. Used to. Everything from agriculture, military, fun, port. There you go. That's what it sounds like. I have not been smoking, Dylan. I just haven't eaten, and I'm starving, so I'm eating a little bit of licorice here. Grape licorice. Yeah. Oh, I had to watch that. Yeah, Namibians and South Africans were at the farm show. Yep. That was pretty cool. It's huge. The complex is unbelievable. It takes you hours to walk around there. Really huge. And they had boats. What else? Who's the braai master? Well, I'm the braai master. I said I got the fire going outside. But right now, the braai is only me. Byron took some business call, so not working out so well. So this inaugural Braai Brus is not going so well. But hey, that's life. He was very distracting when we started, too. So he asked me if I wanted to do the show, because I'd asked him about doing a show. And he said, do you want to do it? And I said, yeah. And he said, okay, this time it's fine. But if it interferes with his work, then we shouldn't do it at this time. I don't want to interfere with his work. I also want to have a program that I've offered to people. I don't want to mislead you. Yeah, so bring your wallet. I know someone who studied under Bill. Okay. Hendo enjoyed the show. I enjoyed doing it. It was a lot of fun walking around and doing this stuff. And I interviewed people there. Remember, I interviewed the guy with the Dan-O seasoning. That was pretty cool. And then I had him on the program after that. He wasn't a particularly good guest on the show. He was awkward in the interview, but he was great interview in person. That was really cool. Seamus wants to know why I'm so attracted to South Africa. Well, can I ask a question, Seamus? How do you have an Irish name, and are you in South Africa? And are you Irish? Irish origin? I don't see many people walking around with a name like Seamus. My attachment or interest in South Africa, I've told this many, many times, but I'll do it now since we have some time here. For the people here, there's some people who probably don't know the story, but most of you do. So as a young man living in rural Appalachia, after I moved to Ohio, I lived on a farm, a makeshift farm, actually. It's only 17 acres, and my stepfather fancied himself as a farmer, but he didn't fancy himself as a farm worker. So all the work fell to me. I did it all. I ran a small dairy farm. I was bored with that sort of life and interested in something exciting. So when I was in school, I'd go to school, I'd go to the library, and I'd look at atlases and gazetteers and fell in love with cartography, map making, and then cultural geography, countries, and I can name all the capitals and all these places and populations and stats about countries. And so when I was young, I want to go to Monaco and San Marino and Andorra and the Vatican, all these tiny countries like Liechtenstein, just to check them out. That'd be cool. And I became fascinated by that. And at some point, I started reading magazines in the library in high school in the late 70s, and I followed the liberation conflicts taking place in Rhodesia, in Mozambique and Angola, and that got me interested in that. And then I'd read a book by a gentleman named Stockwell, I think it was, who worked for the CIA. And he talked about the botched effort to support Holden Roberto and the FNLA, the Front for the National Liberation of Angola, back in 1975, and how it was such an abject failure. We hired mercenaries, and the whole thing, they all ran away. So that really fueled my interest. And I followed the conflicts. And then obviously also South Africa was part of that, so I followed that a little bit. And then I read a book by James Michener called The Covenant, which is a historical fiction book written about events in South Africa using real characters, historical characters, historical figures, and fictional characters that he makes up, and interweaving the story together. He did that with so many topics. So that book really sparked my interest in South Africa. I went to university at the age of 17, and I didn't really focus on Africa then. I was just taking my basic line courses I had to take as a liberal arts student, as a history student, but I still followed stuff. Then I went in the Army. And in the Army, before I went in the Army, I was introduced to rugby at university, a club sport there, and I fell in love with the game, but it wasn't on television. There was no professional sport in 1982. It was a long way off. It was still 13 years before sport became professional. So you only had national sides. The U.S. did not have a national team. We hadn't had a national team since the 1920s when we won the Olympics back-to-back. So, oh yeah. Yep. Okay, so Byron's coming back now. There he is. So we had we didn't have a national team, so I went ahead and he's back. Hang on a second, let me finish this story somebody asked about. Yeah, thanks for sending me the WhatsApp because it doesn't. You could have sent me a text, I guess, in Zoom. That's what I was looking for. But either way, so we got it back. But anyway, so I was introduced to rugby in 1982 as a freshman at university. I couldn't watch it; it wasn't on TV, no national sides. So as a student of history, I researched. I said, okay, who has the great rugby tradition in history? England, France, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa. Well, I'm interested in Africa, so I became a Springbok fan right then and there. In 1984, I started buying material to teach myself Afrikaans, and first question I got was, what, are you a racist? I'm like, what do you mean? Well, you're teaching yourself the language of oppression. I'm like, you do realize that the majority of people who speak this as a first language are not the people you're talking about. Mostly coloreds in South Africa speak this as a first language. They outnumber whites by a figure of 2 to 1. So it's not a language of oppression. It may be viewed that way. And I said, when I learned German, which was my first foreign language of the 5 foreign languages I speak, when I learned German, I learned that language construction says a lot about a people, and it's easier to understand their culture and their mindset if you understand the language. And so that was my goal with learning Afrikaans. And that's where my interest in South Africa came from. I went back to university after I left. I left the Army and went back for 2 years. And my focus as a history student was on Africa, with a keen focus on Southern Africa and a lot of courses, some really great professors at Ohio University who knew Africa. And there you go. And I came back in the Army as an intelligence officer. And I requested early designation to be a foreign area officer, regional specialist for sub-Saharan Africa. I was denied that because there's no such thing, but I wanted them to know that I wanted it when it was time. So that was a clever way to point out that, hey, when it's time, I want to make it. And then at the 5-year point as an officer, I was designated a foreign area officer, sub-Saharan Africa. And then subsequently after 9/11, because we were short intelligence officers, I was sent back to being an intelligence officer. Then I said, well, you know what? With all my listed time, I'm coming up for retirement. I'll leave. So I'm going to ask one more time. And they let me come back. And then I spent the last 18 years of my career as a foreign area officer, specializing in Africa, working at the National Security Agency, the Defense Intelligence Agency, the Pentagon, the White House, the War College, U.S. Africa Command, U.S. European Command, and 8 tours in Africa. And that's my interest in South Africa. Anyway, sorry about that, Byron. But one of the viewers asking why. Now,
sorry about that.
Interesting, the viewer's name is Seamus, not exactly a Tian or Christian or something like that, but Seamus. So
very Irish.
Yeah, exactly.
Very Irish name.
I'm aware of that, and that's why I pointed out. So he's Irish by birth, South African by choice. Living my best life in Cape Town. Where in Cape Town? Belleville. Where are you at? Anyway,
Caronville.
There you
Caronville.
go.
Everywhere in Cape Town is a suburb of Caronville. But yeah, no, please accept my apologies for that. It's Friday evening, just before the
Easter.
Friday evening. You know what I mean? Friday.
Yeah.
It's not actually Friday, but everybody thinks it's Friday evening, and it's just before Easter. And like, there's a lot of people asking questions, and businesses, just everything goes wrong on a Friday. You know what it's like. But anyway.
No worries. If this intrudes in your work, then we just have to do it at a different time. Just let me know. Anyway,
nah, it's not usually like this. It's because it's the Easter weekend.
Yeah, people are jumping the gun because they're taking off tomorrow, and they're not going to bother calling you tomorrow, so they're trying to get it done now.
100%, mate. Make no mistake. Make no mistake.
I know how that works. So we were talking about the Democratic Alliance's Congress. Any thoughts on that? What came out of it? Reaction to it?
So John Steenhuisen won by a huge margin,
83 to 17%. That's huge.
And then, in typical fashion, the other individuals, the opposition parties, if you will, turn around and basically said, well, that must show that there's voting irregularity, right? Because apparently John can't win on his own. He's very white, and because he's white, that means he can't win, right? So
yeah, in fact,
they were all like,
Impo Palazzi is the one that threw shade on. She was interviewed. She threw shade on the process before the election, which is, I suppose that's okay if you have concerns. But then after the election, she's outside Newsroom Africa. Reporter asked her about it, and she said, well, I have concerns, and this needs to be investigated, and we're waiting for the results of it. So then the reporter pressed her on it, and he said, so are you saying that that's something untoward? She goes, well, I really don't understand how electronic elections work. I don't know that. Well, then why are you complaining? What evidence do you have?
So it was very interesting. Ramon and I did a couple of videos on this actually before the elective conference, and we did notice some irregularities with the conference. And the first one is that, as I'm sure you know, she's married to a person from Action SA, and Action SA seems to want to take all of the DA individuals and make them Action SA individuals. Now, the Democratic Alliance is often misunderstood in South Africa quite a bit. I've spent a lot of time with John. I've spent a lot of time with Helen. As you know, we've done interviews with them and we've talked to them. And there are certain elements about the alliance that people don't get. The first is the alliance is a collection of individuals, which means that they do have some individuals on the far right, they have some individuals on the far left, they have some people that are a little bit more socialist and free market. Like, they've got a collection. It's an umbrella organization for individuals that basically don't want to be involved with the ANC, and that's actually originally how it was set up.
Yep.
And hence why it's called Alliance. It's not a Democrat Party, it's a Democrat Alliance, because they wanted an alliance of parties. So you got to remember that in the first instance. Now, the leader of the Democrat Alliance actually has the shittest job in the world, because he has to balance the left part of his party and the right part of his party, and he needs to come out with some kind of coherent thing in the middle. And it's like, okay, how do I get this middle policy ground so that it kind of makes sense to the electorate whilst making me relevant but not alienating a lot of the voters? And the problem is that your voter base might be on the right, it might be on the left, and inevitably the argument that tends to come out about the DA is that it never really appeals to the people who are properly on the left and never really appeals to people who are properly on the right, because they try and do this middle road thing. So they cast themselves as a centralist, and in the process of trying to skirt on the fence, they never actually appeal to anybody. So as a result, as I'm sure you know, the DA has a lot of criticism. So John is actually a very interesting person in himself, because John would claim he's a centralist. We would claim that John's more right of center. Like, he's far more right than you would think. But actually, it's funny, when you get John in front of a camera, he goes into DA mode, and then it's like everything's just bland. Everything's just bland, kind of like scripted rehearsal. The DA thinks blah blah blah. Turn the camera off, and he's like, Tucker Carlson, gun rights, let's all go for Bolsonaro. Like, he's a great chap to talk to. Like, turn the camera on, and it's like, the DA is incredibly, and it's kind of soul destroying to watch. And the reason of that is because as an alliance, he's constantly trying to, shall we say, balance all these different sides, right? I got to balance the left, the right, the center of the party. And so he's got to come up with this kind of like very bland, generic type of policy bullshit. Now, the reason I mention all that is because the former mayor of Johannesburg is on the left side of things. She would not be out of home. She would not be out of home as a member of the EFF. And I don't mean that to be funny. Yeah. She could happily join the EFF tomorrow and be fine. Yep. She'd be fine. She could join the ANC tomorrow morning and she'd be fine. Mm-hmm. And to a large degree, so could Herman Mashaba. I mean, Herman says that's not what he says. He would moan about it and he would say, no, that's never the case. But it kind of is, mate. Like, he would be perfectly, as would Musi Maimane. And we all know that. I mean, Musi's made no real secret about that. He could easily be at home in the ANC. So now they're having this electoral conference, and most people are looking at her like, she's not really our cup of tea. She's more on the left. I tell you what, South Africa's had enough of left-wing politics. We don't want more left-wing bullshit. So what we really want is a kind of like centralist, maybe a bit more right-wing. And so as a result, it unanimously went to John, which should be as a surprise to no one. Now, as a result of that, in all typical fashions, as I'm sure you know, the left can't lose legitimately, right? It's got to be either through fraud or racism, electioneering or racism, or it's like, you guys just don't like me, because the left love victim narratives. Mm-hmm. And Roman and I predicted that the minute she lost, she was going to use a victim narrative. It was going to happen. And we then predicted that she would shift from the DA to Action SA, which we argued was the intention all along, given that her partners in Action SA, and Herman Mashaba, who she still gets on very well, is in Action SA. So the trajectory for where she would go seemed like the Action SA. But in typical fashion, like, she couldn't just leave in quiet, right? So it's not just like, okay, DA no longer represents me, I'm going to go there, right? It's got to be, I ran for the conference. It didn't work for me because of racism, and the DA is a racist party. It's just run by white people. You know, the usual spiel, right? So it's like, I'm going to leave, but I'm going to cause the maximum amount of damage before I leave. So the fact that she came out saying, "Oh, electioneering, this is all fraud. Oh, there's a degree of rape," like surprised no one. Like it was the scripted playbook. We all saw it a mile off. I suppose the one thing though to today that has surprised me is that she hasn't left the DA yet, and actually she says she's still going to stay there.
Yeah, I know she was quite adamant about that, but we'll see how long that lasts. You know, she said, "No, I'm going." And she I'm going nowhere. This is my party. I'm staying here. Yeah, your analysis, that's pretty much mostly the same sort of things I concluded and I published. Sadly, only 300 people watch my video, not 30,000, so nobody else knows about it. But actually, it's a lot more than that. But there is a comment here I need to address, and we'll come back to Mpo Palazzi in a second because there's a lot more to unpack with her interview. I tore that interview apart. John Jarvis said, I have received mails from Rob at DearSA. Dear South Africa, is he back in the fold? I don't know the answer to that, John. Before we go anywhere, I will say that all I know about Rob Hutchison is that we had a good relationship, and literally last moment he asked me if he could talk about a court case, and I said sure, and I thought it was a DearSA case, and it turned out it was his case against his directors. And I said, oh yeah, we can talk about that. And basically I was in, a discovery mode like my audience was. And in retrospect, I allowed my channel to be used by Rob to promote his argument against the people he was angry with. And during that conversation, I said, well, I think, Rob, it's a bit unfair that they don't have a chance to respond. To be fair to them, I should invite them on. To which Rob Hutchison said, absolutely, you should get them on here. Get them on here, answer the questions. And so I set that up. We had Roman Kabanak and we had Gideon Joubert on the program. Gideon looked like someone that did not want to be there. He was not happy that day. And but Roman was not uncomfortable, was happy to answer the questions. Rob came into the chat using the DearSA account and was refuting everything that was being said as was being said and pissing people off in the chat. I sent him a private message in the WhatsApp and said, hey, Rob, you might want to log out of the DearSA account. People are pillaring you. It's not going well for you in the chat. You may not be seeing that. And that was when Roman was answering a question. And that's the last communication I've ever had with Rob Hutchison. I've heard politely from a few people who tell me that Rob Hutchison said I fucked him and that he's disassociated himself with me. I didn't do anything to Rob Hutchison. If anything, he fucked me. I had a very popular segment that just disappeared here. So I'm not going to get in a pissing contest with Rob Hutchison. I don't know anything about that, John Jarvis. All I'm going to say is that that's the last I've heard from Rob Hutchison. I've never heard from him again since then. I wrote to him politely and not cynically, not rudely, not disrespectfully, not disappointed, inviting him back on the program. He had told me he'd be back the next week for our segment. He was a no-show, so I had to do the show by myself, and that's just how unprofessional it's been. But anyway, that's all I know about Rob Hutchison. I don't know. Somehow Byron got looped into this nonsense. I don't know if he wants to comment, but it's probably best not to comment because I don't think he knows anything more than I do.
I know a little bit. So, for full disclosure up front, I am myself, I'm sure you know, even if you watch the processes, my business is currently suing DearSA for breach of contract. Now, a lot of people were very critical of that, and they were like, okay, why are you suing them? And Rob tried to make spurious allegations against myself as an individual and obviously as against my business. And this became a difficult situation because Rob had personally incurred my business financial losses, which their business had promised to remunerate the business for, and then he subsequently attempted to avoid paying those losses by basically kind of coming up with his own cock. Now, the problem is that Rob does tend to have a habit of that, and he has a number of creditors which he owes various monies to, and he does seem to pit his mouth sometimes on the line, and he tries to run what I could only describe as media campaigns to avoid his bills. So, it becomes problematic. It's something that's been seen on a number of times. Now, my current understanding, for those of you who don't know, Roman Kabanak is the CEO of DearSA, the current CEO. He was drafted in there to help it because of who he knows and his reputation in the industry and to help rescue the business. Now, as part of that, I do know that Rob has been removed from the board of directors as public knowledge, and he has been dismissed from the company. That's also second time. That's also public.
This is the second time.
And that is also public knowledge. Now, the reasons for it is because Rob has been given board decisions that he has failed to comply with. And those board decisions were done as a unanimous board. They weren't done by Ramon. They were done by a number of directors. As I'm sure you know, there's a board of directors there. The board of directors gave him certain things that they had asked for him to do, and he denied to do them. One of those was they actually shifted the website domain to a brand new website the business paid for in order to help customers get easier access and put campaigns on quicker. And a big problem that typically tended to happen is that Rob continued to use the old domain. So it was like it became very difficult for the new domain to get any form of traction, even though they paid for it. The next is that they built, or they got a grant from the European Union to do a form of systems analysis and data control, and they needed to migrate the existing database into the new database in order to streamline submissions to parliaments and the various places. The problem inevitably came that Rob refused to plug into the system that the European Union had paid for. So it became a breach of contract between DearSA and the European Union because the condition of the grant was that you do this. Now, Rob then tried to claim that what had happened is that the directors of DearSA were trying to steal the data, made the data worthless. And Rob did actually purchase the data himself. So and you buy this kind of data relatively cheaply because it's not like smart data, if you know what I mean. Smart data is like telling you what you like and where you go. Like this is names and telephone numbers and emails. That's pretty much it. So, but it was a condition of the grant, and he failed to comply with those things. On top of that, there were various forms of irregularity on spending, which meant that he got called into question by the board, which is not irregular, but rather than address it in a quiet way, which actually he originally did, he took his complaints public. The problem was what he actually thought, and his experience was when he takes something public, most people shy away because they don't want to deal with the camera. They also don't want to deal with the press inquiries. The problem is that they made a mistake in assuming that Ramon would be that guy who would shy away. The problem is Ramon's used to being in front of the camera, right? So yep. Ramon's like, okay, if you're going to take me on in a public environment, then I will come on and take you on in a public environment. And that's where the actual conversation became very tricky. So there is a degree of media war, if you will, that occurred between Rob and Ramon. I did get dragged into it as Ramon's business partner and as a person, as a creditor to the business. Actually had very little involvement in it. Why they brought me into it, it was actually kind of insulting. I got used to a degree as the crux to say this is why it had happened. You know, it's like all leftists. I'm the victim. I'm never the cause. It must be someone else. It's not my fault. And in this instance, it was like, well, it was Ramon who was at fault. It was me that was at fault, even though I wasn't part of the business. It was Gideon who was at fault. It was Chloe who was at fault. It's like everybody was at fault. Apart from
hell, Byron, it was my fault, apparently.
So,
anyway.
Now, to answer the question, so that's a very short synopsis. Unlike Rob, I am a media trained individual, which means that I don't say stupid things. Like I've been very vague on certain things and I don't cast allegations. Please understand that this is all public knowledge. So anything you want to know here, I'm not breaching confidentiality. This is all in the public domain. So with that all being said, the individual has said they are getting emails from Rob Hutchinson at DearSA. And the reason for that is because Rob Hutchinson is no longer part of DearSA, but continues to represent DearSA as an agent of that business, even though he is no longer contractually
That's
connected
criminal
with that
activity,
business.
is it not?
It is, and I am sure
It's
that
fraud.
the board of the current board of DearSA, I'm sure, I cannot speak for them,
Yep.
but as a lawyer myself, I can assume that the current board of DearSA will be resolving that in a legal manner. But the current board of DearSA doesn't want to make these things public because, unfortunately, public displays like this, which you saw from Rob, are not good to the enemy. Because what the enemy does is they go, ah, there you go. That's why we don't have to listen to these people. Yeah. So it's not a lacquer way to be. It was incredibly underhanded. We were all incredibly disheartened by what had occurred. But, you know, one of the comments that was made, and it would be something that, and now I'm saying this in my own personal capacity, but, you know, I do question Rob's mental state. And that is not for me to cast a negative aspergus on him, and it's not for me to defame him. He does have a medical problem around his mental state. And to a degree, I'm not going to say I'm not even going to claim that it's all malicious. I do wonder how much of this is connected to the medical state that needs addressing. And I do think that personally, I would suggest that rather than fight these things in a public way, I think that Rob needs help. And I think he needs medical help for the issues that he has. So, I hope it doesn't get incredibly public and difficult for anybody. I hope that it doesn't continue to blow up as it has. I think the problem is that Rob tried to use a lot of the connections that he had, and he tried to use those connections in order to almost fight his battles for him, to make the media war more problematic than it is. And I think what he found very quickly is that when people actually started to look into it, they realized that the allegations were nothing more than allegations, and they didn't really go where he claimed they were. So a lot of people distanced themselves from the issue. And again, I think that's why, to a degree, he went quiet. But the guy has problems, and he needs them addressed. And that's outside of anything. Even if the guy's watching, I would say the same. Like, the guy needs to get medical help because his problems are serious. So
yeah.
Hopefully that happens.
How the relationship with me was broken, I don't get that. That makes no sense whatsoever. I didn't do anything wrong to anybody. In fact, the guy told me I should do what I did. He just didn't like the answers that were going on there. And also, there are some sycophants that are devout fans of his, and that's fine. That's a prerogative. But they came in and poisoned my chat and lied about my conversation, saying I didn't ask the hard questions. I asked Ramon very hard, very pointed questions about the database, about funds, about this, that, and the other. So, people don't like it, they don't have to like it. But, I'll tell you, you watch the news on television, you don't have a button and a keyboard to sit there and bitch and moan and piss and claim that people aren't asking the questions that you wanted them to ask. You just have to watch it. Sometimes that's a better way to do things.
So just to address Ken's question, so Ken says, Byron, so how come Rob is sending out stuff in the name of DearSA? And that is because, according to Rob, he still owns DearSA. He says that he sets it up, he created the trademark, he created the company. And so even if he's been ejected from the company, in his mind, he still owns it.
Is any of that registered in his name? If not, then he's full of it.
Unfortunately, it's not. But you see, the problem was that when he set up certain things, when he set up the domain, it was registered in his name. When he went out and he set up the Facebook page, he set it up on his account. When he went and he set up the Telegram account, he set it up with his telephone number. So these things are all intrinsically connected to him in terms of access, because the system's passwords, and he has all the passwords. So
and that's why he's able to do it. But I mean, if this would go 100%. To court, a business court, the judgment, guarantee, I'm not a lawyer, but I've got a lot of experience with legal system. I guarantee that most likely the outcome would be that he's committing fraud. Those things may be registered name, and he owns those domains, but that he can't represent. He's representing the organization.
He does and he doesn't.
But whatever the case is, he is purporting to represent an organization he's not part of. Correct. And that's fraud.
100%.
That's fraud.
100%.
Yeah.
Now, that has been raised with him, and his answer, both online and in person, is, well, he's willing to die for the business. And so if the business kind of, even if they tell him not to, he'll go to prison for it. So he maintains he's going to continue to do it. And he sees himself as being almost a messiah figure in this whole thing. He's like, I'm doing the right thing. Everybody else is prohibiting me from it. And you can see it in the narrative he pushes, right? I mean, everybody else is an agent provocateur, apart from him. He's the good guy. He's the decent guy. And this is an ongoing issue now that he seems to have. And that's why I say that there is a degree of, there is a mental element to this. There is something that he does need medical help for. It's very difficult for the business, because the business is unable to actually conduct its full functions. Now, for those who don't know, what the business actually does is it sets campaigns, it amalgamates the data, and it sends the data to Parliament for processing. But the problem is, there's almost like now two competing DRSAs collecting the data. Why are they collecting the data in that fashion? Angas, I don't know. What is the relevance to this? Angas, I don't know. But it is occurring like that because, to a large degree, it is, and I described this once with Ramon, there is a large degree of founders syndrome. I founded it, therefore I own it. Yeah, okay, I know there's others involved there, but I found it. It's mine. And that is typically now where the actual problem is coming in. So,
your dog walked into the room. He's trotting around there looking for something to eat?
Nah, he went and had a drink, and now he's gone back to his bed, so he's gone back to sleep.
There you go. Well, yeah. Anyway, that's it's people asked. That's why we addressed it. That wasn't the topic we came to talk about tonight. But you guys asked about it. Marilyn said, "Should we unsubscribe the email list?" It sounds like there's two competing email lists, Marilyn. So I wouldn't know what to tell you there. I wouldn't tell you to unsubscribe. Anyway, so that's kind of where that's at. Yeah. So back
I don't want to comment on whether or not people should or shouldn't do that.
No, don't comment. I'm not at all connected to it. You are tangentially connected to it, so it's not in your best interest. But my comment is I wouldn't suggest you unsubscribe. Also, I wouldn't suggest anybody give up on DearSA. He's done some truly amazing things, and Rob has done some amazing things for South Africa. This issue hopefully will be resolved. It's a shame the damage it's done to SA, and it's also a shame that I had a really cool segment that people really enjoyed and was my favorite segment because Rob was so calm and I stayed pretty chill during those sessions, no rants, so I do miss that. Let's get back to Mpopolache. So Mpopolache said prior to her losing, and then she said afterwards, after the reporter used the words and she repeated, she said the DA had a golden opportunity here and they botched it. Basically, my words, not a verbatim what she said. Basically, she said that they had a chance to pick someone who represented the community. To me, that's a dog whistle. That's coded speech for you have to have black skin pigmentation. So, and she continued on. She said, and I'm that person. Now, this is my point. People rail against John Steenhoy. By the way, I'm definitely not a fanboy of John Steenhoy. I don't have any issues with him, other than the fact that his moat dragon handlers won't ever live on the program.
So I actually want to make this clear for individuals, just for my own before we actually discuss this, because otherwise people always question like, what's the motivation for saying what we say? But I really like John as an individual. I spend time with John. I've talked to John. John as a guy is great. John as the head of the DA, yeah, that's very bland, but it's because of the reasons that I've described to you. On a political front, I find myself far more right-wing than John wants to be in the public domain. So in terms of a right-wing bend, I'm probably closer in line to the type of rhetoric that the ACDP will give in public. Yep. Even though they'll never be big enough to actually take the vote. If I were to say what policies align closest to me, they're probably ACDP. So when I make comments on the DA, I just want everybody to be very clear that I'm making those comments as an informed analyst. I'm not making them as a voter of the DA who loves the DA. And therefore, I want to, be a quote unquote DA shill.
Well, no one's gonna accuse me of being a DA shill. I also don't intentionally target them, but I hold them to account like I hold all political parties to account. The DA does not politically align with me. They are too far left to center on most things. They are way too comfortable with the state owning private enterprise, and I've got problems with that. They're way too comfortable with welfare handouts. I'm uncomfortable with that. They're way too comfortable with sticking their nose in foreign business when they have bigger issues to deal with domestically. They're not running the country. If they were running the country, I'd be okay with them sticking their nose in Ukraine and other places, but they really need to focus. And there are far too many people in the DA, especially senior political women, who have a bizarre worldview. Natasha Mazzone, in an interview with Joe Emilio, saying she idolized Nancy Pelosi, made me vomit. That made me vomit.
Actually, that was with Ramon. That wasn't with Joe Emilio. That was actually with Ramon. That was Ramon's
She said it with Joe too.
Did you?
Yes.
So we often make fun of her for that very reason.
You should. Because that's so uninformed. That's ignorant. One of the biggest crooks in Congress, not to mention her political views, but the woman profited tens of millions of dollars off a corrupt visa deal to kibosh legislation that would have put fees on Visa. And she come anyway. So, but Natasha Mazzone and then Mpopolache in the discussion before talking about and Barack Obama, one of the greatest presidents in American history. Look, I'm obviously conservative, have major issues with Barack Obama, but looking at this passionately, the guy started more wars than any president in American history. The guy murdered American citizens extrajudiciously without a warrant, without anything from the government. The guy doubled our debt in less than 7 years and blamed everyone on the planet except himself. And he divided this country on race, which was never in the case since the 1950s. And to sit there and say he's one of the best presidents of American history, the only reason she can make the conclusion is because she aligns with his skin pigmentation. I find that ridiculous. There's people in the DA, their worldview about what's happening in the world, just, so I'll never be accused of aligning with the DA. That said, anything, including a dog catcher or a Great Dane, would be better than the ANC at this point. So, but back to Popolazzi.
Can I just address Dylan? So Dylan says Freedom Front Plus is who I trust. So there's a massive, and I think people actually need to stop and smell the roses a little bit because they don't understand how politics in South Africa works. There are a number of political parties that were set up to be what I can only describe as graft type parties or grift type parties. They were set up because they knew that they could get what we would call a proportional representation vote. They can get a seat in the National Assembly. They can earn a paycheck. They know that they will never be in government. They know that they can sit there, basically grift along, get paid a salary, and just sit in Parliament on a PR vote. A good example of that is the UDM. The UDM will never grow as a party. They will never be
horribly.
They've shrunk, but who cares, mate? Like the person who set it up, he's still there. The general's still in power. He's still got his seat. He's still where he feels he needs to be. And the problem is that when you come on a growth trajectory and you say, let's grow this party, even if you sat down with the general and said, let's get the UDM to national kind of status, you need significant fundraising. You need to do significant campaigning. There's a number of things that go with it. It's time consuming. There's a lot of issues with it. And to be honest, some of these parties just don't want that. And so they just grift along with their one person in the National Assembly who does fuck all, and he just takes his mullah and he don't care. And I can name those parties off the top of my head. You'll have your UDM, your COPE, your ATM. Like these parties are all over the show. The problem is that originally, and as much as I hate to say it, Freedom Front Plus was one of those parties. It was set up by Grondeveld. It was a family-led party. The family were in parliament. He never had national aspirations because he's a white guy running a white party. Like no one thinks, okay, they're going to win the national vote. They're going to get their small little section. And the thing is that the party itself actually became more popular than people thought. It started to get votes in the areas everybody were very surprised at. It started to take some of the DA votes. It won a vote in KZN. It won a vote in the Bluff. And everybody knows everything's rough on the Bluff. But, it all came, they started to actually get some national traction. And so the party did kind of take a little bit of interest in itself. It started to get more seats in places. But the biggest problem is that the party still doesn't have, should we say, national aspirations. And I'll give you an example of that. They're not all over the press. They're not on national stream. They're not running big campaigns. They don't have big donation funds. They're not trying to run big donation funds. Their policy conference is very muted. Like, this isn't a party with national aspirations. The problem is that in South Africa, there are technically only 4 political parties with national aspirations. One of them for myself and Remark is a bit of a joke party, but the other 2 are well known. The first is the ANC. The second is the DA. The third is the EFF. Now, the EFF, there is actually an argument, and Roman and I make this argument all the time. They don't actually want to govern. They want the grift, but they don't want to govern.
No, that's what I said earlier. They don't want to govern. That's exactly my point.
Yeah. The fourth party that's out there that does have national aspirations is Action SA, whilst the mullah's rolling, because they have managed to raise the relevant funds in order to push through an agenda. The problem is they don't actually have enough of the vote. And so they're hoping to kind of get like a Lesotho type thing, where there was this new upstart that came in, he had a lot of like interest, and then he managed to win the vote as a surprise victory. The problem is it's never really going to happen, because everybody knows when you get a third force, like it takes a good few election cycles for them to be big enough and mean enough. So that does mean that in the world of reality, there's the world of idealism. There's ideally, ACDP will win the national vote. And when it wins the national vote, we'll have a Christian nationalism society and everything will be great. But that's never going to happen. So the reality is the only party that is big enough, strong enough, and mean enough to take the ANC on directly, regardless of whether you want to call it a shill, this is purely rationalistic. Use your brain for a second. Your brain will tell you I'm right. It's the DA. The DA
problem,
is
of
the only
course-
party big enough.
The problem, of course, with that is the DA has shrank from election to election. They after ascending, they've eaten their apogee. They've shrank and gone the other direction with their foolish policies in 2019. Their abysmal performance in 2021. Which and this is the problem I have with the DA is they run around like they did well. They're lying to the public. We're the only major party that you lost 37% of your voters. The ANC lost 32%. They lost 37. They lost municipalities in Western Cape they controlled for 15 years. So that's but and they are not going to get more than 30% next year.
No, they're going to get a 30%. That's where they are. They're not going to get a majority, and I think they understand that, which is now why you asked, going back to the segment, you said, "What I think of the conference?" Well, John actually said very clearly, we're going to have to go into a coalition, and so the big thing that they're now going to spend the next few months on is actually creating a coalition pact with the relevant parties, so that when it gets to 2024, they can get the relevant vote, and everything will be hunky dory. So it's very clear what their strategy is. The reality of the situation, though, is that a lot of people always refer to that time of the DA's, shall we say, great decline underneath Mmusi Maimane. Now, remember what we said in the previous segment, right? We said the problem with the DA is it's this umbrella organization that has parties on the left and the right, and sometimes the left control it and sometimes the right control it. Now, under Mmusi Maimane, the policies of the DA were pushed in the left.
Yeah, they were pushed towards the left. Light.
100%, and that's because they went to the left. And so the problem is
they lost hundreds of thousands of voters as a consequence.
100%, because the problem is that in any politics, any political politics, you need to remember that we have what we would typically refer to as the Overton window, right? The Overton window is we have parties on the left and on the right, and it's supposed to give people in a democratic society a degree of choice. If you want to push and you want to focus on welfare type stimulus, you pick the left-wing party. If you want to have free market type stuff and you want individual freedom, all that bullshit, you pick the right-wing party. The problem is what happens when both parties represent the left. They both want to pursue social grants, social welfare, lack of freedom. Then the problem is, how do I identify you to me? I just look like a clone of you. And that's exactly what happened with the DA. Like a lot of people looked at that and they were like, ANC light. And to a large degree, it was. But under John, what they are attempting to do is to push the party further to the right. So they're now coming out with things like, well, we actually want to privatize. We want to get people off social welfare.
They want partial privatization. They don't want full privatization. They still want state control. At least that's what they're stating publicly. Now, a lot of people, and it's just come up here in the chat. I was going to say it, but Ken stole my thunder while you were going there. A lot of people have been accusing the DA that they're not serious about governing, that they're comfortable in that official opposition role because they've got the grift, they've got the graft.
They are very serious about governing.
Well, then they need to learn how to do media and social media. Their media is atrocious.
You're preaching to the choir, my friend. And Ramon and I make the same comment all the time. You know, many times we've even said, guys, if you're this shit at your media campaigns, give it to us and we'll bloody do it. Yeah. Like your media campaigns are just atrocious.
They are.
But Ramon and I made this argument.
I've been making this for ages. I mean, when Easy B came out with his incredible rap song in Afrikaans, that was the launch of the campaign. And my YouTube channel had more views playing that and getting copyright claims and then deleting it than they got on that video on DA. That's insane. I mean, it's pathetic. Yeah. They never used it.
Yeah, I mean,
why have the guy write the song? Why pay for the song and then never use it? It was brilliant.
Remember,
just one example.
There's left wing and there's right wing in the party, and they constantly got this thing of like the left don't want to upset the right don't want to upset the left. Everybody trying to keep the peace.
And we see that with what happened in Phoenix when the posters went up during the municipal campaign,
100%.
And then like cowards they took them down,
100%.
and they lost a lot of votes because of that. Yep,
100%.
Yeah.
Well, you say that they lost votes elsewhere in the country for taking it down and been seen as weak.
Yeah, they probably got votes for
They won Phoenix, huh? They won Phoenix. So arguably those posters,
they don't control Durban.
And I'm not saying otherwise, right?
Yeah, but I got your point. They won Phoenix. Yeah, that's fair enough.
The point was that the posters were deemed to be like this electoral defeat because the left part of the party were buy into. This is what you find with all people in the left, right? The left congregate. They club together because, there's safety in numbers. Like they lack the morals of their convictions, but where they lack the moral of their conviction, they're bolstered by numbers. So as long as you got numbers, you're fine. And so what ends up happening is the left tend to galvanize. They tend to galvanize each other. This is what happened with woke people. Woke people support woke people. They don't know why they support them. They know that probably what they're talking about is bullshit, but it's fine. They've got safety in numbers.
Well, it's like asking people in Manhattan that hate Trump, why do you hate him? Well, because he's guilty. Guilty of what? Well, the charges. What charges? Well, it's the same thing. It's the same phenomenon.
Yeah. So, the reality is that what typically tends to then happen is that the left, if you will, the EFF, the ANC, were like, it's racist. But then the left of the DA also jumps on the bandwagon because they feel at home with those kind of individuals. And they're like, well, if they say it's racist, it must be racist. I mean, they wouldn't lie, would they? And so it's like, now it's racist. Now you've got a war in the DA. It's like the right's like, no, it's not racist. And the left are like, it is. And the problem is, how do you appease everybody? So as a result, they're like, just take it down and it will go away. And, this is like sacrilege rule 101 of dealing with the media. Never apologize, never back down. And we sent messages to the DA saying just that. Never apologize, never take down, never backtrack. And they did that. And unfortunately, that wasn't done by John, and it wasn't done by Helen, and it certainly wasn't done by DMF Eason, who actually put the posters up. It was done at a federal level, at a voting conference, with the majority of the left part of the party, and they were like, this looks bad for optics. And unfortunately, it did upset people, but it was one of those contentious issues.
So Francois Rogers wasn't responsible for taking down either then?
I don't know who exactly in the party was responsible.
Okay. Anyway.
I know that the former mayor of Johannesburg, who we were discussing, was one of the people at the meeting.
Yeah.
So she was one of the people that felt that it was racist. But at the end of the day, it cost them the moral high ground.
Oh, it did.
Because had they stuck with it,
right or wrong, if they stuck with it, at least would have shown they had the courage of their convictions, and that's why they look waffling, they look weak, they look pathetic. And anyway, but a lot of people didn't take them seriously as a consequence, and they had an atrocious performance in 2021. They can crow all they want, but it's just lies. The only success, in my view, they had was Umgeni with Chris Pappas, and I don't attribute it to the DA.
Chris is great though.
I attribute it to Chris Pappas and the deputy mayor and the DA on the ground there, not the party itself. They did atrociously everywhere. I mean, losing municipalities in Western Cape is unacceptable. They should have snatched municipalities in Northern Cape, and they didn't. Yeah.
Have you seen Chris talk?
I've interviewed him. I've interviewed him in person twice.
Hello, I'm Chris, and I'm very posh. And then he just talks in the most fluent Zulu, and you're like, huh?
Yeah.
Hey, white boy can speak Zulu. Yeah. Like, it's really
not only
weird,
can he speak Zulu, but he understands vernacular. He also gets where people are coming from. There are no cultural references in the Zulu community in Umgeni that he doesn't get. So, no, I mean, he's doing very well, and that's a singular success, but that's tied to a personality, and to be fair, he's building a team around him within the DA that's there and sharing and getting those people experience. So it'll survive Chris Pappas is what I'm saying. It'll survive. When he moves on or he does something else or they snatch it for something else or he becomes a billionaire software tycoon, whatever he does in life.
He won't. I think he'll stay in the DA for a while, but I think his next bit, they're going to push him to Parliament, mate. Yeah, like that guy's going to Parliament.
There's no doubt about that. He's not
going to Parliament.
He's too big for that town is what it is. I mean, for the DA. Yeah, but I mean, that's a singular success and they can't take credit for that. That's Chris and that's the DA there. And it's not the National Party. But the two things, so I do want to come back to the Freedom Front Plus a little bit later, which you talked about because I find interesting your take on it and I want to give my take on it. I don't disagree with your point that a lot of political parties were set up in 93, 94 to get their piece of the grift or of the pie because they knew they'd sit in Parliament and get checks and blue light escorts and all that. I don't disagree with that at all. And in fact, without naming parties, I'll say that, yes, I agree 100% that that's why a lot of that goes on and why the political spectrum is so fractured because people have no incentive to be part of a party that can actually get somewhere because they're going to get their little piece. But I want to get back to Impopolazzi real quick. So Impopolazzi said that, that they missed they fumble their chance to resonate with the community. That's my words. And she said only she, basically she was saying only, she didn't say that, but she's implying that only she could do it because she's got black skin. But the problem I have with that is John Steenhuisen, they always rail against him because he doesn't have a university degree. But in many ways, I see John Steenhuisen much more as a person of the people, the average Joe, than Popolazzi. I mean, she is a uber privileged, wealthy university graduate, medical doctor. I think she's a forensic pathologist, if I'm not mistaken. Former mayor of the largest city in South Africa, a privileged elite person who also is attractive and how is she even remotely tied to the people in Alexandra or in Kailicha or in Phoenix or all these other places? She's not. Just because her skin pigmentation matches, that doesn't make her part of the community. That's ludicrous. I mean, that's the problem with this race hustling. It really, I find, vile and offensive. I have more in common with the people in Alexandria than Popolazzi does, and I'll tell you that right now. That's a statement of fact.
Yeah, and so there actually is a deeper issue actually involved here than just that. And that is, if you look at historically, and I'm sure you agree, like historically, the way that governments would typically pick were that they were representatives of the local community who had established themselves as representatives in the local community. And so you typically would go after the guy who was like a business guy, a guy who was very well known, a guy who had set up a charity or school or whatever, Herman
Mashaba, something like that.
Someone like that. And that's how traditionally politics occurred. But then you got this amazing thing that happened, and I think Bill Clinton really kind of like epitomized this, and then Tony Blair obviously jumped on it, and that is what we typically refer today as the professional politician. The guy who goes to, in England, they go to Eton. Here, they probably go to Stellenbosch or Wits University, and they go there and they study political science, and then they go straight in and they be a politician. But the problem is these people have no life experience.
Yeah.
They don't know
how to run a business or run a balance sheet, how to lead people in battle, how to lead people in business, how to turn a profit, how to invent things, how to inspire people. They don't know any of that. They're just full of cock. They don't know any of it. They're full of cock.
But what they do know is they know politics, right? And they know like media, and they've got their little buddies and their cronies. And then you get these guys deciding, especially now when you start kind of going on and you want things like central planning, the idea that the government should plan an economy. But then you got professional politicians who are trying to implement degrees of central planning because they see China with China's central planning. But you know what they fail to kind of recognize is that China's economic success is for threefold. Number one, they make sure that the guy who runs finance is a finance guy. And when the guy and the finance guy fucks up, he goes before a firing squad. He's dead. Like when the next guy, the guy who runs electricity, he runs electricity. He worked in the electric sector. So they get experts in those fields. And when he fucks up, hey, not so good, huh? He's before a firing squad and he's never seen from again. And so that works very well. The next reason that China's economic thing works on a central planning point of view is because the Chinese make it a habit that they will own everything. So even Disney in China is predominantly owned by the CCP. Disney doesn't have a controlling stake in their own business in China. They are a minority shareholder. The CCP is the majority shareholder, which means that the CCP are, to a degree, incentivized to make sure that the business works because they own it and they want the grift, right? The third reason for China's success is because China's success wasn't China's success. And this is the one that people don't talk about. China's success is that all the Western countries that were already successful decided to invest, shift everything to China, and create their factories there using existing know-how and practice. And they put all their money into China in order to develop their factories so that cheap shit can come out of China.
There's one piece missing in that argument. But go ahead and finish and I'll add it. The problem is
when those people pull out of China, China got to stand on its own two legs. And that's not so easy anymore. Because that central planning, with all those experts are only experts in their field. They don't develop. It doesn't.
Right, they're not entrepreneurs. They don't have ideas. They're not inspired by free speech and free assembly and trial and error. It's not a society where you can fail and come back. I mean, most entrepreneurs fail repeatedly. It's rare that you get somebody like Elon Musk that turns almost everything he touches to gold. I mean, look at Richard Branson.
Very rare.
Richard Branson has failed far more times than he's been successful. Remember Virgin Coke?
Virgin Cola? Virgin Media?
Exactly. Virgin Music.
Virgin Mega Stores.
Yeah. Oh, those were a big flop. The one there at Speaker's Corner there on Oxford Street in London. Anyway, but so China, none of that would have been possible without the Clinton sponsorship of their entry into the World Trade Organization, knowing full
100%.
well they would not comply with World Trade Organization rules. They would put artificial and physical genuine barriers to prevent people from exporting to their country. They would also commit intellectual property theft. They would spy on competitors, and they would violate copyright and intellectual property. And the reason they're successful, the key thing is the three things is the access to the market. I agree with the other things. That's why they have success internally. But the access to the markets that we enabled, the foolishness of American, European, and other manufacturers shipping their production to China to save a few percentages of a point to make profit. And then finally, the fact that we allow them to continue to violate the international norms and get away with it. I mean, it's insane. That's why China is successful. And, it's like the conversation. People are always asking me this, Byron, is that, if there's a war, China or the U.S., I'm like, well, listen, if you want to shut China down, all you have to do is blockade the Straits of Malacca, and they'll collapse in 2 weeks. They can't feed themselves. They can only produce about 5 million barrels a day, and they need 13 to 15 million barrels a day of oil. They will freeze to death. They will go hungry, and they will not manufacture anything. And but what about the China holds all this U.S. debt? At one point, a decade ago, China became the single largest foreign holder of U.S. debt. Historically, it's been Japan for 40, 50 years, then usually Germany, the U.K., and so on. But yes, China moved up, and they had over 9% of the outstanding federal debt, which is only a small portion of our debt, but 9% of the outstanding federal debt. But then about 6 or 7 years ago, they started offloading those T-bonds and T-bills, and they went back below Japan. And people are like, yeah, but you have to answer to China. No, we have to answer to Americans. 67% of our debt is held by American institutions, American individuals, American investors, pension funds, insurance companies. That's where our debt is at. That's why an internal default is a bigger concern. And if we go to war with China, as long as it's not a nuclear war, we shut down the Straits of Malacca, and they're not going to have any cash because they rely on the interest payments that come from us, and the trade will stop. So China is probably more fearful of a conflict than people realize, because they're not going to win the conflict unless it goes nuclear. That's the only option they have, and that's just disastrous for them. So.
But coming back to the point is that everybody, this is everybody who sat there kind of wanting the central command type thing. These professional politicians running all this bullshit, but they have no experience.
Yeah, but they're
so you've got all these people with political degrees, but they haven't got a fucking clue what they're doing. And then they go to John and they go, right, John, why don't you have a degree? And I've got to ask you the question, man. Who gives a flying shit? I mean, what the hell's the degree help you with? Like, does it make you any more classy in what you do?
Like, I can tell you exactly what it is, Byron. I've lived all over Africa. I can tell you exactly what it is. People are hoodwinked by shiny objects. Shiny objects, that's what it is. Look, in Liberia, we cautioned recruits to come to the Armed Force Liberia. Not when I say we, I'm talking about the government of Liberia, Liberians and the Americans and the other expats who were there running the program. They came in, they applied to join the military, they got investigated. We told them, do not submit fraudulent documents about your education or your origin. You will be disqualified on a morals clause because we don't take liars. Do not tell us. It's okay if you don't have a degree. We're going to give you an educational test for the West African Education Council, and it will determine your level of education. If you meet the standards for a high school graduate, then you'll be allowed to come in the military on that basis. But if you give us fake degrees, and it happened time and again. And you see it in South Africa now. Every time we turn around, another ANC official is caught from Fort Hare or somewhere else with fraudulent master's degrees, bachelor's degrees, certifications, because they're impressed by shiny things.
But what the fuck does it matter?
It doesn't. Because
one of the ministers...
No, it doesn't matter. But the problem is that these people are impressed by bullshit. They're impressed by CVs that are bullshit. Listen, I have degrees from multiple universities, from University of Maryland, Ohio University, Iowa State, the Army War College, Troy State. I've got master's degrees coming out my backside. It doesn't mean I'm smart. It doesn't mean I'm brilliant. It doesn't mean anything other than I have the patience and the ability to sit down and follow the rules and execute the task put in front of me for a specified period of time. And maybe I open my mind up and learn something. But it doesn't mean I did. I know other people have the same degrees and they're complete walking boneheads. They know nothing. This is the problem with this stuff. It's like my ribbons. Look, I have 21 decoration ribbons on my dress uniform. And I have like 9 decorations for one of those ribbons, which is quite a bit. So I mean, I've got probably like about 35 or 40 awards over the course of my career that go on my chest. That doesn't mean anything. That means I had good bosses who recognize my talent and my contribution from time to time. It doesn't mean I'm a war hero. It doesn't mean I'm brilliant. It doesn't mean anything. People are impressed by bullshit. Now, there's nothing wrong with having degrees, because there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with having lots of decorations. But when people hang their reputation on that, or that's the basis for why they should be the person, that's bogus. It's like here in the States, I see campaigns. When I run for office, I'm not going to put the biggest thing up there, veteran, combat veteran. I put veteran on my CV, but I'm not going to run on going, I'm a combat veteran. That doesn't mean better. I had to go to combat. I didn't ask. They sent me there. I did it. I did my job.
But you see the problem here, Chris, and I'm going to use Ramon's line, is you're thinking like a white person.
I'm thinking like a human being with a rational sense of common sense. Here.
You're thinking like a whitey, my friend. You're thinking like a colonizer. Because the problem is, as colonizers, we have this amazing thing called philosophy and reason and rationality. And we all know that logic, rationality are all constructs of white supremacy. I know this to be true because the left told it to me. And the left would never lie. But with that being said, you also need to understand that as a person who applies to that, we understand that there's this philosophical thing called appeal to authority. In other words, I know what I'm talking about because, like, I've got the shiny degree, right?
The chief is always right.
And I've got the title chief on my badge. Therefore, respect your elders. It's that whole thing with like in families. Never question the elders. They know what they're talking about, even when they're a fucking moron. I've got my father, bless him, and he's deceased. My father was great, but a bright spark he was not. Like, he frequently came out with pearls of bullshit that when I actually looked at it and I thought, this guy didn't really know in some respects what life was about. But he lived his life and he did his stuff, and God bless him. I'm sure he's in the right place. But at the end of the day, just because you're old don't mean you're smart.
Yep.
But we all know that we must respect the elders, because that's what they tell us. And unfortunately, this appeal to authority is something that Western philosophy told us many moons ago. Be very careful to a person that tells us that they're there because of the shiny badge. Like, don't always check that. You should be critical. Unfortunately, we don't live in those times anymore, mate, because that kind of thinking is whiteness, and it's white supremacy, and it's systematic of white struggles and racism. And what we now have is trust the science and listen to the politicians. And if the guy tells you he's an expert, he's an expert. And how dare you question that? What are you? They're the Karens? You must listen to the Karens. And if you don't listen to the Karen, they will write to your manager. And I hope you understand that, Sonny. Now trust the science. Take the jabs, eat the bugs, and shut up.
Eat the bugs. And the lady just told me she loves my rants, but will care for your welfare. That wasn't a rant. That was a mild statement. But the lady, you've missed some serious rants on my program if you think that was a rant. I have gone for 35 minutes straight ranting in the past about something just for effect because people were loving it. It's funny because back in the day when I would do the rants, I'd watch my viewership start climbing, and the longer I was in the rant, the more people tuned into the program. I don't know how. It must be some kind of algorithm for the sound volume that YouTube was picking up. But there's a comment earlier from Seamus saying something. You hold the DA to a higher standard. I don't know if he's talking to you or me, but it came about that the chat doesn't always sync with our conversation. But it came at about the time that I was talking about. I want to ask you those two things. So I'm not. If you are still there, Seamus, who holds the DA to a higher standard? I hold all these parties to a higher standard. I think the only party that maybe someone could probably say that I don't hold to a higher standard is two of them, the ACDP and the Freedom Front Plus. And that's because much like Byron, when I look at what the ACDP stands for, I don't see much space between them and myself. And when I read the platform rather than the manifesto of the Freedom Front Plus for their last national election, I don't see much space between them and myself. This is not the Freedom Front Plus of Constantine Villon from the early 1990s. This is a very different party in my view, and I think the results last time bear that out. They're the only party in municipal election that did particularly well. A very small party and still an insignificant party at the national level, but in the municipal elections, they quintupled the number of members of city councils they had, and their vote grew by 150%, the actual number of votes, but still a very small party in that respect. But yeah, so I want to come back to Freedom Front Plus. I actually know people in the party leadership, and my frustration with them, and maybe it reinforces your point about parties just trying to be there for the ride. My frustration with them is why they're not more visible, especially given their success, and why they're not more visible in their efforts to recruit black South Africans to vote for them, because it has been happening in some places like Limpopo and in Gauteng, where I can attest to it personally, but not on a national level. I don't see it. And why they aren't out there loud and frequently. I mean, we hear more from Bantu Holomisa than we do from Dr. Groenewald, whom I know personally, and I've interviewed several times. For me,
he's great.
It's a bit frustrating for me why they're not, and maybe that leads a little credence to your point. The other argument people make is that they're just trying to quietly build themselves on the sideline, but they need to make a move. This is the time they need to make a move if they want to become, they could maybe increase their party to 5% or more and then actually be a factor at the national level. But
they think they'll get there anyway. Like, they just amble along and
not going to get there by sitting back and just taking the low road. That's not going to happen.
It's worked so far for them, huh? That's the point.
Yeah, I suppose that's the point. But this last time, I think I attribute the reason votes went is a lot of people are just irritated with the DA. They didn't see the DA out from this election.
100%, man.
So they 100%. Said, screw them. I'm not going to vote for them anymore because they don't deliver, with the exception of their claims of delivering the Western Cape. But anyway,
Charles says the Freedom Party. Yeah, we both going off.
Go ahead. You can read it.
He says they grew because of the actions of the previous DA leader, who was very divisive, and is actually we already discussed that. It was the move to the left by the DA, and that was dumb.
No, we absolutely agree. Yeah.
Nobody wants all political parties in South Africa to be on the left. That's stupid. And that's not how the Overton window works.
And Byron, that's my point now. If the Freedom Front Plus wants to do well next year, and to me, well would be 4% or more. That would be very well for me. But if they want to do well next year, they can't count on an abysmal Democratic Alliance leader, because Musi Maimani's not there anymore. John Steenhuisen's there. The party is united behind him. At least the people who picked their leader are from the 2,000 delegates. So that's not going to be a way for the Freedom Front Plus to grow next time, because beside the people that are going to be pilfered from the DA are the ones that are being pinched by Action SA. Freedom Front Plus has probably gotten all the voters it's going to get based on the performance of the DA. The DA now is. Look, I disagree with the DA is growing under John Steenhuisen. I don't see that. I need to see some tangible empirical evidence of it. But I will admit and agree that the parties staunched they've staunched the bleeding, and they're recovering. And they have enough time now, in my view, if they've genuinely launched their campaign, which they sort of claim they did at their Congress. They have time now to be successful next year and get to 30%, which would be a huge improvement. But they're probably going to be, I think, 25%, 26%.
I could run the DA's campaigns all day long. Billboards with ESCOM stations on fire.
Yeah, exactly.
Courtesy of the ANC.
Courtesy
of the ANC.
Proudly brought to you by the ANC.
That's all you got to do, mate.
No, that's what I said. I said that in municipal elections. And why? Instead, we got people taking posters down in Phoenix, and the only person we see in the news is John Steenhuisen. No one talking to Chris Pappas. It was impossible for me to reach that guy unless I was a local media guy.
Well, interestingly enough, Ramon and I have actually made this argument, and that is the biggest problem the DA has, and unfortunately, they don't seem to understand how politics works to a degree. Yeah. And that is, politics works on the basis of a personality. They need to have big personalities. Why does Donald Trump work so well for the Republican Party? Because he is a fucking huge
force of nature. It's a force of nature. Yeah.
What? You may think he's a prick or whatever.
When did the DA see its strongest, most impressive, and rapid and successful growth? Under a force of nature at the time. Helen Zille, the most exciting politician in the world at that time. She built this party from a 3% party to a 20+% party. And since then, they've lost their moorings. Maybe they've refound them now, but the proof will be in the pudding. They've got a chance. Let's see if they pull it off.
Helen is as you said, she's a force of nature. And now, because of that, whenever there is a problem in the DA, it's Helen's fault. You know why? Who was the mayor? I'm going to ask you this genuine question.
Yeah.
Who was the mayor of Swane? Do you know?
What time frame?
Well, when he left. He recently left.
Randall Williams?
Look at your face. You're like, Randall Williams. And who was the mayor of...
No, I know who it is, but I don't know if you're talking about the Cope guy who just got sacked after a week. That's why
No, not that guy.
Randall Williams, yeah.
Who's the DA mayor of Kocha?
No idea right now. I get your
keep going,
point.
my
Well, again, who's the DA mayor? Who's the DA mayor of Umgeni? Why isn't the DA putting Chris Pappas' face and the successes they're having there? I mean, I do more.
He's white.
I do more.
Because he's
Well,
white.
they're cowards. Then they're cowards. They are cowards, and they deserve not to rule.
That's the answer.
If you're gonna be a pussy, you don't deserve to be leading. That's you either get out and lead or you don't. Everywhere I've lived in Africa, I've had great relationships with every ethnic group around me, black, white, Arab. It doesn't matter because I resonate. I get to meet people. I listen to them. I talk to people. I get involved. One of the things that's always been, and this comes from Southern African experience, but it's all over Africa. And I'll tell you this phrase. I don't know if you understand it, but if you want to relate to local communities, particularly African communities, if you understand this concept. Now, in the Francophone West African countries, the term is the deuxième bureau. I don't know if you know any French. That means the second office. Which in military jargon is the intelligence agency. But in second office, it literally means that. In Southern Africa, it's called the small house. And there's a different name for it in Uganda. One of the first things I do is when I get to know somebody locally, like I knew my driver, I got to know my driver because I had a driver first time ever when I was in Uganda. And I asked him one day, I said, hey, let me ask you, what do you call this around here? And he kind of smiled and snickered like, Colonel, how would you know what that is? Well, a small house is when you have a successful person in government, military, and business in African culture, particularly, but not exclusively, also European culture, who has a second informal relationship with another woman and oftentimes has children, and those two things never. So a lot of, when if you know culture and you know things like that, you understand it, then you can understand the mindsets of people, kind of like what you're going back to there, the appeal to authority. I get that. And I also get the small house deuxième bureau thing. And look, everywhere I've gone, I've been able to relate to people. It didn't matter that I was white with these people. It didn't matter that I wasn't black, I wasn't brown, I wasn't a Muslim. When I was in Tunisia, I went to the staff college, L'École d'État Major. The college was almost entirely Muslims because mostly Tunisians. There was an Italian who was Catholic. There was me. There was a Spanish guy. When Ramadan came, which corresponded with December that year in 2001. Anyway, no, 2000. Yeah, 2001. In 2000, it was in December. When Ramadan came, I fasted. Now, in North Africa, that's not easy because the sun doesn't go down at freaking 10 o'clock, So it's not like in other parts of the world where the sun goes down quicker. But the sun doesn't go down. So I fasted. And after fasting for like 3 weeks, we were at a break before we left to go home for the day. And I was outside and we were talking in French. And one of the students was talking and they're all like, they're buddy with me and stuff. And I'm just trying to improve my French. And somebody said, yeah, no, because Wyatt, he's awesome, man, in French. He's really great. This guy, man, he's one of our brothers. He's fasting for Ramadan. And one of the other guys, a friend of mine, is like, no, he's not. Wyatt's drinking Cokes and eating M&Ms all day long. He isn't fasting. And they're like, no. And they like 40 of them, like, no. You don't speak bad about our brother Wyatt. He's fat. And I was fasting. And my point is that leaders learn about the people around them. They learn how to resonate. That's why it so pissed me off when 3 years ago I started doing this broadcast and I would hear from white South Africans, well, we can't go in the townships and we can't go here, we can't go there because, well, that's your fault. That's your fault. Chris Pappas can go in the townships. Chris Pappas can relate to people. Oh, and the guy is white as Casper. He's white as Casper the Ghost.
Let me tell you something about townships because I've been in it with many of the politicians to go through them. Mate, when they see the white people in the townships, mate, they give you a guided tour because they're like, a white person came to the township. Oof. Hey, this is a big day, eh? So they're like, we take you for a tour. You're going to see Sipo's Tavern. Then you're going to see like Tembu's shop. And we're going to give you the tour of all the highlights. Huh? Yeah, it's going to be lekker. Like, these guys really want to show you the place because it is unusual for the whitey to be there. Mm-hmm. Right? So they're actually not as scary as you think. But, this becomes a big problem. So Dylan said, South Africa is a shithole. You know what? It's a backward country, he said. Yeah, it is a backward country. You know what's also a backward country? Chris, I say this with much love. America. America's a backward country.
Okay.
You know why it's a backward country?
No, I have no idea.
Too much government control.
Oh, yeah, look, when Barack Obama comes on and years ago and says capitalism's failed, I'm like, what capitalism, Rocco? There's no capitalism here. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, government dictated, community reinvestment, forcing banks to give loans to people who aren't creditworthy based on their skin pigmentation. That's not capitalism. That's state control of the economy. This is not a capitalist society. It's a quasi-capitalist society. Don't blame capitalism for failures because supply and demand will dictate things in a free market system, and it will take care of itself. But no, we don't live in a society like that. I mean, look what they're doing now, Byron. Hang on, we got a super chat there. Wow, a super chat, 14 Rand. Thank you, Ari Erasmus. Senate Bill 686. I don't know if you're familiar with this because I don't know how close you pay attention to American politics. This is now sitting in the Senate. This bill, which designates China, North Korea, Iran, Russia, Venezuela, and Colombia, countries like that as basically pariah states, the axis of evil.
The axis of evil. That's the phrase they're using. The axis of evil.
They're not using it, but I'm throwing it out there for context so people get it.
But they actually are using it.
Well,
that's what the media is using. I haven't heard
that.
Right?
But
the media is using axis of evil.
But this axis of evil, we are going to regulate anytime any of them have a company in those countries, whether it's owned by the government or owned by private, it doesn't matter. Anytime there's a company, and they say they're targeting TikTok, but it's going to come back on everything. Let me finish. So anytime they have 1 million American users, and they're stretching the definition, legal definition of American. In America, when it comes to security clearances and government services, we consider Americans for those purposes, not for voting, but for service and such, and legal purposes, to be an American citizen or a green card holder, a valid green card holder. Those people are American citizens. So anyone that's here has a green card, it's not American, they would be included in this. So if you have a social media site or a newspaper subscription and you have 1 million people over the course of 1 year that qualify as Americans under that definition, then they will have the ability to shut you down or direct your actions and close you off. It's supposedly an infrastructure bill, and you should see it covers quantum computing, which isn't even here yet. It covers routers and Wi-Fi and mobile networks and cloud servicing and this and that and that and this and everything under the sun. Basically, the entire freaking internet is regulated by this bill, and they can shut anybody down when the Secretary of Commerce can determine that there's a threat to national security. And do you know what they say national security is? Your personal identifying information. They're saying that your telephone number, your home address, your date of birth, and your name are national security information. What a crock of nonsense. Because my government didn't treat my personal information as national security information when they left the back door open to the security investigations database that the Office of Personnel Management runs, and 21 million Americans with security clearances, including people with false derogatory allegations in their accounts. All this stuff from all these investigations is in there. And the Chinese, the Iranians, the Romanians, the Brits, everybody was in that database for 18 months. And they didn't consider that national security information. This bill, once it's introduced, will be amended down the road if it gets passed, and it's likely to be passed under this corrupt regime if the Republicans in the House cave. It will get passed, and then they will shut down the internet. It gives them the authority to shut down nodes, entire distribution centers. There's only 4 of them in North America. Shut them down at a whim because they decide to. This is Stalin-esque. This is unbelievable. So look, when you talk about a country that's broken, hey, you ain't gonna get an argument from me. This is an abomination. This thing violates every tenet of the most sacred document I've ever read in my life, the United States Constitution. Unlike the South African Constitution, which runs on for 77 pages, ours is concise. And look, so I'm not gonna disagree with you. Yeah, you got it. I'm with you there.
So Heidi Dave says, so where do you think is the best place to immigrate to? And so I'm going to take the
Finland.
Approach that I am going to take the approach that all of morning. I'm going to take the official morning shot approach.
Yeah,
that is, and please let me explain this.
Stay home.
South Africa is the best place to immigrate to. Let me explain why. I'm going to give you an example, and then I'm going to use a comment that's already in the comment section. The UK has now come out. They've put these new powers in place. I don't know if you've heard about it, but what they do is they can take control over your mobile phone.
Yep.
They can force your mobile phone to do certain things without you can't turn it off.
Without your knowledge.
Without your knowledge. And so what they can do is they can send an alert around the entire country. They're actually going to be practicing this in the next few weeks. And what it's going to do is it's going to make your phone squeal, and you can't turn it off. You can't turn it off. They can do that. You know why? Because it's a deep state with overarching powers, and there's fuck all you can do about it. And it's a state that works. So when they want to come up with bullshit laws, they get bullshit laws.
Well, not just bullshit laws, but bullshit laws that abrogate your liberty. That's what that law is.
100%. Now, in South Africa, as one of the comments says, we're a failed country.
So we can't
even get electricity.
How are you going to do that?
You probably don't even have mobile signal because the bloody power went out.
Yeah, so you have to worry about that capability.
Do this weird shit? Like, they're coming out now with central CDC, central digital bank currencies, right? You're going to have all your stuff on a central bank. The bank can turn you off.
Yep.
We got no electricity. How are you going to have a digital bank currency in South Africa? Come on, man.
No, that's not going to happen. That's exactly what I tell people. So, I mean, they think this is far-fetched, but it's not. They're going to play this. If they keep at this pace, this is what they'll do. I'll go to the pump. I'll pull my card out. I'll stick it in, and then I'll start pumping petrol, and it'll stop after like 3 liters. And like, what's wrong? And the manager will come up and say, you've exceeded your carbon credits for this month. Okay, well, I just went to a rugby game in Chester, Pennsylvania, where gangland shootings happened a kilometer from the stadium, and I'm at a petrol station trying to fill up, and I can't leave. What now?
So there's a number of things that people don't value when it comes through to their own countries where they are on their own freedoms. We all use this word freedom like as if we somehow know what it means. And everybody wants to use the new neoliberal type version of freedom, which is I can do whatever the fuck I want. I read some Ayn Rand, and therefore Ayn Rand tells me I should just be able to do what I want. Libertarianism, baby. Just let me get on there. If I want to marry the kids, I'll marry the kids, right? So that's the idea these people have. And that's why we're now getting a lot of the stupid woke bullshit that we see in the West. And every time you challenge it, they're like, oh, no, it's a front against democracy. You can't do that because my body, my choice, right? If I want to kill the babies, I kill the babies. Like, this is what they think. The problem is that's actually not how freedom actually works. So I'm going to give you an example of proper freedom. And I'm going to use an example of the place that everybody in South Africa thinks they really want to go to, and that's the UK. Because why? I don't know. They're all like, well, UK is full of whiteys, so therefore I'll have a nice white experience.
Nope.
Even though the current person who runs Scotland,
Indian,
the First Minister,
South Asian,
is from Pakistan. And the guy who runs London, the most important city in the UK, is Sadiq Khan.
Luton is South Asian. Leicester is
Prime
South
Minister
Asian.
is Rishi Sunak. Mm-hmm. And Preeti Patel, Sajid Javid. They're all strong British names. Anyway, the UK is a fantastic place. Anyway, that's what I heard. So I'm going to give you, and I told this once to Ramon, and he's like, that's a very niche explanation, but I want you to think about all the elements that, I'm going to give it to you now. But he says that this explanation I gave him, he says, that's very niche. But as I was trying to explain to him, you need to think about the component parts in this and just try to understand it. So, Chris, I want you to picture this in your head. You're going to get your horse. Yeah? You're going to jump on your horse. You're going to pit like the old Western style. A gun and a sling on the side of your horse. And you're going to take the horse for a walk. You can picture it, right? Cowboy. You got it, yeah?
Okay.
Can't do it in the UK.
Yep.
Let me explain why. There's no private land. It's all owned by somebody. There's no private land to go to. And if you want to go somewhere, you need to book a place to go. It's going to cost you a lot. You're going to get maybe 15-minute slots, and you're going to have to drive there. You're going to have to do it, and it's going to be incredibly controlled. The land space is really small. You're probably going to have to book 1 month in advance because it's going to be booked to the fucking hills. And even when you get there, you're going to be like, oh, my fuck, like this is just a headache. So then when you do go there, it's going to be so stupidly expensive. You're going to think, shit, do I need to take out another bond on the house? Like, what's going on? If you put a gun in a sling, even though legally it's okay, some Karen going to see you with a gun, she's going to report you to the police.
Yep, and the cops are
going to be like, the cops are going to come. They're going to come because they have to.
Yep.
Even though you haven't broken any law, and the cops are going to arrest you.
Yep.
You're going to break zero rules.
And you get arrested for not breaking the law. Yep.
Yep, you're going to get arrested for not breaking the law. The cops are then going to take your shotgun because you're only actually allowed to own a shotgun. So this just says a shotgun in there. And they're going to take your shotgun from you because you had a complaint. Okay?
Yep.
You broke no laws. You did nothing wrong, but you lost your gun. So you're going to be sitting there thinking to yourself, I can't just take the horse for a walk on the highway because the horse might poo and you'll get a fine for that. You might also hold up some traffic and that's not so lacquer. So you're going to get into shift for that. So you're going to sit there thinking to yourself, I can't be bothered to take a horse anyway.
Yep.
And so your basic freedom of just jumping a horse, go up the road, gun and slack, because maybe you want to shoot some pigeons, can't do it. Can't do it. So you got to ask yourself, okay, well, how free are you? And it's funny. I'll give you that as an example, and people go, "Well, that's very, very niche." But then I was speaking to Ramon the other day, right? And I'm talking to him about my ranch. I have a ranch, and on the ranch, I said to him, I had to jump on the horse, and I had to go somewhere, and I had to, like, one of the sheep were dead, and I grabbed the tutu, and I had to put the sheep down. This was a shit day. Like, the sheep had got bitten by a snake, so it got bitten by the puff at it. There was very little I could do. I had to put the sheep down, and I said to Ramon, and he goes, that's my childhood. Huh? He's like, and I was like, what do you mean? He's like, we're always jumping on the horses, going places, tutu strapped on the shoulder or so. And I'm like, Ramon, remember that story I told you about the horse, yeah? He's like, yeah. I said, remember how I told you it couldn't happen in the UK? He's like, oh, yeah. I was like, so your childhood couldn't happen in my country. Couldn't happen.
Yep.
And he's like, oh, yeah. Okay, I get it now. And it's like,
but it's not just niche. That's the thing. People need to pay attention. First off, technically, you can't even hold demonstrations in the UK. The country that gave us the Magna Carta limiting the monarch's law, his rights in 1215, is a country that a year and a half ago banned demonstrations. Technically, you could be arrested for it. They've looked the other way for the most part. But just going to a demonstration, how can you not demonstrate? That's not liberty. And then you have this situation where the guy took the rainbow flag, the gay flag, and made a swastika out of it. Yeah. And then the gentleman,
Lawrence Fox is his name.
The gentleman who's a Falklands veteran retweeted it, and he was arrested for a hate crime, hate speech, and they did it on a Sunday to embarrass him in front of his neighbors. I mean, that's not a crime. That's ridiculous. It's not a free country. It's a fascist state is what the UK has become in the last decade.
100%.
Yep.
It's a fascist state run underneath the pretext of doing it all for your safety.
Exactly. And
they do everything.
Nobody's safety. It's nobody's safety. It's nonsense.
So remember what I just told you. Why can't I use the horse? Well, it's not safe, eh? I mean, it's going to be a hazard to other road users. Why can't I have the gun? Oh, it's not safe to the public. So we take a lot of your freedoms away because of your safety. And as C.S. Lewis once said, you need to be careful of the guy who's limiting your freedoms for the purpose of your safety. Yep. Like C.S. Lewis knew this in World War II because it's a proper thing. Now, the reality is I can then take this a step further. And it's like, let me use the example of, like I mentioned at my ranch, right? Okay. You got ranches there in the US. You guys know all about it, right? So I'm sitting there the other day and all you got to do is go watch Clarkson's farm. That's it. Just go watch Clarkson's farm. Check how much shit that guy gets for a property he owns. He's paid for and he owns
taxes on it.
He can't move soil from the left to the right of his property without a permit.
Yep.
He can't put a driveway on his property without a permit.
Yep.
Let me tell you how this works in South Africa, just so we all know. I build whatever the fuck I want on my property. I don't care if you like it or not. If the guy comes to check it, I give him $50 and a Coke. We're all good. And he fucks off. And when it becomes an actual problem, when I go time to sell the property, then there goes everything on the plan. And I've got two options at that point. The first is I go, no, and then I get it all on the plan. Or I say, you take it as it is without the plans, but you sort it out. And I pay you a little bit extra and you make it go away, right? Because again, South Africa is a failed state. So you can do these things, which means that in reality, my country, we do whatever the fuck we want, mate. Whatever we want. We don't ask permission for shit. But the problem is, and this is a distinctly Anglo problem, the Anglos all feel the need. The Boers aren't like this. The Europeans aren't like this. The freaking French aren't like this. But the Anglos, the Americans and the British, and the Americans and the British stock, they all put a shit ton of faith in the rules. If the rules say don't do it, you don't do it.
No,
you don't do it.
No, you're right.
Don't follow the rules.
Australians, Kiwis, Canadians, Americans. Yeah, absolutely. You're 100%. Yeah. No, look, I mean, there's things I don't do just because it's against the rules. Just because I'm acculturated to follow the rules. And that's why I have a real problem with disregarding the rule of law.
But no one else respects that like that.
Yeah,
and it's not the thing.
But you know what? When we get rid of these shitheads running this country, we got big hammers. And it'll be hammer time.
But you know what I'm saying?
And
that's one of the nice things about South Africa is that when you actually get the mindset properly, you know what? And we tell this to people all the time. You need to get your mindset proper in South Africa. When you get your mindset proper, this is the freest place in the world to be. You do what you want. I'll give you another example just because I have that many of them. In the UK, I was there, we did a podcast. I was there in my house. It was costing me £30 a day to heat the fucking place. It's bloody expensive.
That is outrageous.
Right?
That's $40.
Because the gas cost is like fucking horrendous, and the electricity cost is horrendous because of the war in Ukraine and green energy, and I don't know, some other bullcrap.
That's bullshit, because you got lots of natural gas in the North Sea.
We know, right? But you can't do that because that'd be environmental damage. Like, come on.
Yeah, but
don't you follow Greta Thunberg? She knows what she's on about.
They're reopening collieries now in the UK 35 years later.
Yeah, I know. So the problem that then came in is I went and I'm like, fuck this for a laugh. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to do something smart because I can afford to getting solar on the house. So I called the solar guy up. Can you come
Permit.
see us? So the first thing he says to me, he says, I can do it in 6 months from now.
Yeah.
You remember that story I told you about the horse?
Yeah.
You need to apply 6 months in advance, huh? So anyway, he says, yeah, I can do it. I'm like, look, I'm only here for a couple of weeks, man. Just come have a look, give me a quote. I'll see if I like the quote. I'll tell you I want it. If not, I'll tell you the footage. So the guy comes there, right? He says to me, okay, he has a look at the place and he goes away. On my house in South Africa, I'm going to tell you what I got. I got 18 panels, 450-watt panels. I have a 10 kVA inverter, SunSync, very nice. All wireless, Wi-Fi, you name it, so all that shit. 18 kVA in batteries. I'm never offline because I run a ranch. All the fencing around my place all has an independent solar panel, right, for the cattle. Like, it's nice. The cost there that cost me, I'm not going to tell you what it costs because we're on a live stream and people will be like, hey, check this Lonnie dude out. But it cost me a bit of money. So this guy in the UK, he comes to me and he says, hey, here's my quote. You get 9 panels. They're 300-watt panels. So they're small ones. He says a 3 kVA inverter. Okay? He says
What's the point?
And a 3 kVA battery. For the same cost of what I have on my property here in the UK. So just for those, because some people don't understand the differences because they're not solar experts, but everybody understands number. 18 of 450 versus 9 at 300. So there's like, this one is shit.
Big difference.
This one is like, wow. Okay?
Well, not to mention, you actually have sun. There's no sun in the UK, but anyway.
I will get to that in a second. Anyway, so then it's like a 10 kVA inverter versus a 3. Like, I think we know which one's better. Huh? I got 18 kVA in batteries versus 3. So I say to this guy, mate, like, this is the same cost. I said, I don't just want to bullshit you. Here's my quote. This is what I paid in South Africa. What the fuck's going on here? So the guy says to me, he says, Chana, here's the problem. I can only put so many panels on the roof because that's the laws. And I can only have them at this distance to that distance to this. Like, it's very complicated.
Yep.
You can't just put panels on the roof. They have to be designed this way. He says, and here's the problem. Then once I've done the plan, I get to submit it to the municipality. The municipality approves it. So we call them councils. So it has to go to the council, the municipality. They sign it off. I get permission to build it. Once I put it on, I got to put scaffolding around the property. Then I get to get somebody to come out there. And he says, what we have is that the scaffolding goes through, and then some guy comes and gives me an approval for the scaffolding. Then I can go onto it and I can put the panels on. Once I've got the panels on, I put them on. Some guy comes back, he signs it off. Then I got to get the electrician in. The electrician will wire it out. He'll put it in, and then we have to get an independent guy to come in and certify it. So I said to him, so he says to me, see, all the cost on this, the reason your system's so small is because of the labor, because of the regulations. Now, let me tell you my experience in South Africa. So this guy actually said to me, he said the entire cost is like a month's worth of work. That's why it's so expensive. Here's South Africa. Hey, Sipho and Yanni, they rocked up here in their van. They had a ladder to get on the roof. The ladder wasn't big enough. So what they did is they parked the van next to the building, put the ladder on top of the van, and they got on. They were passing each other up panels. Hey, chuck up. Then another guy came in. He wired the place up. He pushed it all through. He pushed the button. He said, it works, huh? It's like, turn all the lights off. I'm like, wow, lights. He's like, okay, cool. We done, huh? So I was like, yeah, thanks. Bye. And off he went. It was done in half an afternoon. Finished. Yep. Huge system. 1-2 days. Done. Not 5 months. You know why? Because don't come here with your regulation bullshit here. We don't even have electricity. What you going to do? Ask me for a permit. Fuck off. Right? So you can look at South Africa and go, oh, it's a failed state. I love it that it's a failed state. I love it. because the government can't do anything. They can't come out with tyrannical bullcrap because they can't even keep the lights on. What you going to do? Tell me I must have a permit. Yeah, cool.
But
no worries.
They do come out with tyrannical bullshit. It's called the scam, the lockdown, and they criminalize 250,000 people.
I remember but again, remember what I said about the anglers. The anglers are like, there's a law there. We must follow the law. Mate, go to the townships.
Yeah, I know.
Go to the townships during lockdown.
But I'm not talking about the townships. I'm talking about Western Cape, where people went after people there. So
Karens, the anglers, right?
Yeah.
The anglers. The anglers, remember?
Anyway, look, I mean, I've told people what it cost. My house, which is not that big, 1,800 square feet or something like that. In order to put solar panels in my house, I looked 2 or 3 years ago, it was $45,000. And that's just to have them installed. And then I have to put new struts in my roof because it wasn't designed to carry that load. So I have to reinforce my roof, which cost me another $5,000 to $8,000. So we're approaching $50,000. And the panels will have to be replaced. They say 20 years. That's bullshit. They'll have to be replaced in 8 to 10 years, maybe 15 if I'm lucky. And then on top of that, I can sell the power back to the utility where I pay for my electricity, but they pay me 1/3 of what they charge me for the same energy. And I don't mind them paying me less because they're going to sell it and they're going to, so I mean, that's fine, but not 1/3. And they don't pay taxes on it. When they buy it from me, there's no taxes, but I still have to pay taxes when I buy it from them. So the whole thing is a scam. I'm not interested. And by the way, we get several feet of snow in the wintertime, so I don't really feel like climbing up my roof and shoveling off my solar panels.
See, but I have a different experience in Afroland, right? Because in Africa, I have the lekker life because I have sun. And so my property, I turned off the electricity switch, and I don't remember how to turn it back on. It's there somewhere. I'm sure it works. And I know that there's people in South Africa that's like, you're very lucky and you're one of the privileged and whatever else. Right? But, at the end of the day, the point is, like, people value different things. And the first is, and I hear this a lot in South Africa, they were like, but we're going to go abroad because, it's for my kids. My kids. And as I say to them, I went to the UK as a kid. 1998, I went. Daddy got a job. He got a job in central London looking after the Queen's Guard because Daddy was military. That's actually what he did. I'd say he went to go away for Queen's Guard. Like a job he had. Until David Cameron came in and sold the Queen's Guard off. He's like, it's too expensive. We're not having that anymore. So what then happened, I got there, right? I spent my entire career there. Until I decided to come home. But let me tell you something. Let me give you an example. Milton Keynes. I lived in Milton Keynes.
Yep.
Lovely place. I got there first. Lots of farmland, lots of greenery. I remember whiteys everywhere, man. Until one day there was this first black guy who rocked up in Milton Keynes. We were like, oh, wow, black guy. Cool. We actually stopped. He actually stopped and spoke to us because my dad was wearing a Springbok jersey and he was like, hey, South Africa. And he went to go speak to him. Long chat they had. Then we had this amazing thing called 9/11. And all of a sudden, these Syrians started pouring in, and Afghanistanis, and Iraqis, and you name it. And we got more and more and more invasion. And South Africa got worse, and we had lots of people come there. Then we had the farm invasions. You may recall Robin Mugabe's famous farm invasions at the beginning of the 21st century, around 2000s. Everybody flocked in from Zimbabwe. Now we got this melting pot of like booking everything. Now, the official statistics is that white people in London are less than 25% of the population. And if you've been to London, you don't dispute that. You're like, no, that sounds about right.
You can't go on the high street. There's no English on the high street, even in high tourism season.
100%. But it's like that in
Leicester,
Liverpool,
Luton,
Leicester,
Liverpool, Sheffield.
all over the show.
Yeah.
Now, and everybody will go, hey, so what? But the problem is that these grievance groups come in there and they raise kids, and these kids are all taught critical race theory and other bullshits, and they all taught grievance studies. Grievance studies. We're all a victim, huh? And so what ends up happening is this BBC does stupid things like, Queen Anne Boleyn. Yeah, she must have been a black person. She couldn't have been a white.
My ancestor is Queen Anne Boleyn. That's bullshit.
Yeah, that's what happens, and that's what you're finding. New series of Vikings. Y'all must have been black, yeah. So it's like because they can't see how life would have been different. Now the moral of the story is all these people told me, I'm going to the UK, because it's a safe life, it's a safe future for my kids. And the point that I would make is when I rocked up in the UK in 1998, Virgin Megastores was still a thing.
Yeah.
They used to sell these amazing thing called VHS VHS cassettes.
And CDs.
These days, it's CDs. What's that? I've got members of staff who are young. I say to them, these things called VHS. They're like, what's a VHS?
It's better than it's better than Betamax.
But they've never seen one.
I know.
Because they're so old, they've never seen one. Some of them never seen a CD.
This is a telephone. 1 ringy ding, 2 ringy ding.
You know what? I actually got one of those in my office here. Yeah. I had to, because we're having problems with people using their mobiles. Like
answer phone. What's an answer phone?
They weren't actually doing their work. They were spending too much time on like TikTok and shit. So we banned mobile phones in here, and they're like, yeah, but what if my mom needs to contact me? So we got we actually got a landline in here. And then one day, one of the members of the staff come up to the HR manager and they say, I need to call my mum. But so she says, well, use the phone. And she says, how do I use the phone? So she says, you pick it up and you push the numbers. Yeah? And then you speak in the headset. I wish this was a joke, man. They put the headset up the wrong. They put it up. Seriously, I wish this was a joke. They put it up the wrong way around. And we're like, no, other way. Right? It was so funny. But they'd never seen one of these things out. Landline, what's that? But the point is, the UK I went to in 1998 don't exist anymore.
No, it doesn't. It's been gone for 15 years. It's been gone for a long time.
And the problem is that people go there, like now, they're like, it'd be great for my kids. Mate, you don't know what the fuck that place is going to look like when your kids are there. I mean, the current projections are, that the UK by 2050 is going to be a minority white country. And do you know what that brings? Hey, baby, that brings BE and all the other grifting and the bean countering. You know, all the shit your ancestors, your kids' parents, tried to escape. Yeah, they got all of it. They got it all over again because the shit just followed them. And we can already see it in forms of certain government policy. Yeah. Government policies are already starting to try to implement quotas. And, I work in finance. I get emails from the regulator and they're all about, have you done your DER assessments, your diversity, equity, and inclusion assessments? Yeah. You're like, have you got the right amount of bean countering there in your company? You're like, fuck off, dude. So don't think that this shit isn't going there. Because as you get, the population becomes more of a different diversity, what do you think is going to happen? The rules are set by the victors. The majority set the rules. And unfortunately, when they become the majority, they change the rules. That's the way it works.
And this has been my argument about unconstrained immigration from the very outset is, you can be wonderful and you can be kind to people, but when people who don't share your cultural norms and values and don't accept your mores come in and demand things, and we see that in Londonistan, you go to East London, Sharia law is applied. It's not even legal, but they apply it there. These places they aren't even official authorities. We see it in Germany now. In Germany in 1990, there were maybe 30 to 50,000 so-called people of color, black folks, and those were half of them were mixed race, the result of British and American service members having kids with Germans, and the rest were professionals like doctors and lawyers and dentists who came to work in Germany. Many of them got citizenship after being there for 12 years. But now today there's almost 1 million Afro-Germans. There's not such thing as an Afro-German. It's BS. That's because they just let people flood into the country, and these people are demanding things. I mean, when I was in Germany in 1990, I came back from the Gulf War in 91, and I was out and cleaning my car outside these tall apartment buildings, and I hear this shrieking. This African's beating the living crap out of his wife in the street, and they're in Germany. And we intervene, and they call the cops, and he's screaming at us, "It's my right. I own her. I can do this." No, dude, this is Germany. Get the fuck out. You don't own anybody here.
It was. And so the moral of the story is they all go, I'm going there because, it's going to be a good future for my kids. Mate,
they bring their shit
I hate to tell you this. When you go to Europe or Australia or whatever other liberal shithole you want to go to, and you're going there for your kids' future, I want to highlight something for you. You haven't got a fucking clue what their future is going to look like. Yep. Neither do I, because the future hasn't happened yet.
Yep.
What you do need to do is look where the current economic and immigration policy leads to. And if the country is taking on a shitload of foreigners, and you're one of them, then you need to understand that the future you're going to get ain't the future you think you're going to. And so they actually did this documentary in the UK, and it was hilarious. Because what it was so funny. Because it was a woman from Ukraine had gone to England, and she got housed in Birmingham. Now, if you know Birmingham, it's like predominantly Muslims. Like there's Muslims everywhere.
I went to Edgbaston. That's in Birmingham, right? Edgbaston is Birmingham, I think. Yeah, I went there,
and it's like predominantly Muslim.
I went there for the one-day international World Cup. It was New Zealand versus Pakistan. I thought I was in Karachi. 40,000 people. And 6 of us were rooting for New Zealand.
And you can walk down certain streets, and the locals say to you, "Hey, Wati, you're not welcome here. Huh? This isn't your neighborhood. You need to leave." Yeah. They will literally tell you that.
Yeah.
Right? And so the funny thing is that what then ends up typically tending to happen is you go there for this great laugh, right? And you look at these things and you're like, the way that the UK is progressing with the way that all these kind of populations are, where you think your kids are going to be in the future, it just isn't where you think. I don't.
Yeah. No, I know.
Anyway, sorry, I lost my mode of thought there.
No, your point.
So this Ukrainian woman. Let me go back to it. So this Ukrainian woman, she goes there. She gets housed in Birmingham, right? Okay, so there she is. She's there in Birmingham. She says on this interview, she says, they said to her, what's the problem? She says, when I came to England, I thought my neighbors would be English, and they were like, "What do you mean by that?" She's
probably
like,
going to be Polish.
She's like, English.
White.
And this black woman who's talking with the English accent, she's like, "What do you mean, English? I'm English.
No, you're not.
Lived here my
you're
whole
not
life."
English. You might be a British national, but you're not English.
And she's like, English. And she's like, "Do you mean white? Because that's incredibly racist." She goes, "Well, I didn't want to say it." And she goes, well, what's wrong with it? She says, "Well, I come from Ukraine, and my school's all Muslim." She's like, they're all Asian kids. She's like, "It's really weird." And the woman says, "Well, I don't see what the problem is. It's diversity is our strength," because they've all been told that. So the mantra has to be repeated at least 5 times.
Bullshit.
At least 5 times, because that's the mantra. So she says, "Well, diversity is our strength, and UK is a very diverse country." And she goes, "Yeah, that's very interesting. But, they're trying to teach my kids certain things, and they're not really what we do in Ukraine." And they go, "Like what?" And she says, "Well, they're trying to teach them about Allah. And we don't worship Allah at our home." And she says, and so the woman who's interviewing her goes, "Well, that's very Islamophobic of you." And so the upshot of this entire, it's so funny, because you can see like there's this part about her she wants to say, but she knows if I say it like full on, I'm in trouble. Huh?
Yeah.
At the end of the interview, she actually stands up and she says, "I'm so glad I spoke to you." The woman's like, "Really? Have I helped you integrate into Ukraine, into the UK? Have I helped open your eyes?"
I'm going home.
So she says to her, she says, "No, I feel that I'm safer in Ukraine, so I'm going to go back to Ukraine." You're like, there you go, folks. She feels safer in a war zone. Yeah. She's like, "Nah, like these guys are all around here. There's lots of Muslims in my school. Don't you feel unsafe?" And she's like, "Ooh, why would you feel unsafe? Like that's incredibly racist, isn't it?" Yeah. At the end of the interview, she says, "I'm so glad I spoke to you. Yeah, I'm deciding I'm going to take everyone back to Ukraine."
Yeah.
Just like.
Well, look, I mean, the UK is it's suicide. It's political and cultural suicide. It's ethnic suicide. Look, being an American is not based on ethnicity, skin color, faith. It's based on an ideal. Being born here obviously makes you an American citizen, but being an American is an ideal. It's something the Democrats don't hold by anymore, but we hold by this ideal. It's tied to our Constitution. But being German is being German. Being a Swabian, being a Bavarian, that is an ethnic cultural identity. Being English, I encounter this a lot of time with people who live in the UK and live in England, and I talk to them, they're like, "Yeah, I'm English." I'm like, "No, I'm sorry, bud, you're not English." "What do you mean I'm not English?" "Do you have a parent or a grandparent that's English?" "No, but I was born here." I said, "Being born here doesn't make you English. It's a cultural identity. If you are mixed race and your mother's black and your father's white, or vice versa, and one of them's English, then you can identify as English. You may be a national of the United Kingdom and carry your United Kingdom passport, but it doesn't make you English any more than it makes an Englishman a Scotsman, or it makes an Englishman a Welshman. They're not. They're not.
But they all want to try to tell you this. But you know what's really funny?
Yeah.
You know what's really funny? Like everybody's like, no, I'm going to be English. Speak to South African families, man. When you go to the UK and you raise your kids, how are you going to raise them? You raise them as a Brit or a South African? They're all like, no, I'm going to teach them South African mannerisms. How are your kids ever going to identify them as a Brit, huh? Huh? Oh, they're British, are they? Nah. What did you say? I'm raising them to be a South African. But they didn't get raised in South Africa, my friends. They got raised in Britain. Mm-hmm. And so here's the problem that you end up having, especially as a white foreigner. You go to Britain, you have big problems. Because the first problem is you speak fluent English because you're an Anglo and you're white. But you're foreign. But you're white. So you get all of the negative connotations for being a foreigner, but none of the brownie points. You know the brownie points? You know the one, right? The like, you black, you from Nigeria, like, cut them some slack. You know, they're foreign. Like, you don't want to be racist. But it's okay to be racist to the white guy because he's white. Yep. And he's from the Anglosphere. And he talks English.
He's got that white privilege, so it's okay to do it to him.
And he talks English. So he's basically one of us, but he's not one of us. So you get all the negative stereotypes and none of the positives, like none of them. And the problem is that no matter how long you live there, you got to remember saying, you'll always be foreign, my friend. Yep. And once you come to realize that, then you have to realize something. Having economic freedom or economic liberalism, where, you know what, I've got an extra little bit of money. I can have a smaller house, but I've got some extra money, and I can use that money to buy an expensive £5, 100 Rand latte from Starbucks. Hey, lekker. I've got Starbucks money. Like, I don't have that in South Africa because finances are a little bit more tight, but I've got Starbucks money, yeah? And so even on Morning Shot, we sometimes make this joke. We say people would much rather be in a country where they can afford Starbucks versus where they have their own liberal freedom. So they got Starbucks money, but everything's run by the state. Yeah. You're a foreigner in your own country. You'll never be anything more than a foreigner. You're going to get propaganda thrown at you on 24/7 basis. Hey, but at least you're safe, eh? At least you're safe.
Every single time I've entered the UK in the past 15 years, I've been stopped by South Asian origin British immigration people to harass me and ask me what I'm doing in the country. And every dodgy looking shit goes right past me, no matter how they're dressed, no matter what they're doing, no matter what bags they're dragging behind them. I stop without a beard, clean shaven, military haircut, professional, driving through with a diplomatic passport oftentimes, going through there, and I get stopped every time by some arrogant South Asian who's sticking it to whitey. It's really annoying.
So let me, I just want to actually also answer this before it disappears. So yeah. Slippery Pickle says, Byron, how many times have you been cavity searched at Gatwick? What did the English do to you? Fuck all. I lived there for 20 years. Like, hey, I married there. I had some kids there. I had a nice business. Like, I know the UK very well, far better than most people. I went to university there. I got my doctorates there. I taught at a university for 3 years there. Hey, man, I had a career there. Like, I know the UK better than any of the people here. But at the end of the day, you know what? No English person ever did anything to me at Gatwick. You know why? Ain't anybody.
There ain't no English people there. Exactly.
There ain't no English people working.
There's virtually none in Heathrow. Virtually none in Heathrow these days.
100%, my friend. Nah, 100%.
They may be Brits, but they ain't English.
You go to Heathrow, you arrive there on the plane, arrive at Pakistan on the plane, same experience.
It's same
experience, my friend.
As a white person, same experience.
That's not racism. That's not being horrible. That's facts. So and that's, my friend, is what we call demographic change. Yep. And that's what I'm making people aware of.
It's intentional and orchestrated intentionally to cause things. Listen, in this country, we have over 600,000 prepubescent and teenage girls who are at risk of female genital mutilation because the unconstrained migration of Yemenis, Egyptians, Nigerians, Chadians, and so forth coming in this country in the past 30 years. What they do is they call it the cutting season because our education system, kids get out of school in late May, early June. They don't come back till September. We have 3 months. It's tied to agricultural. When we're an agricultural nation, you need the summertime for extra labor, but we've never changed the system. So kids get the whole summer off. A lot of teenagers get jobs and make money and stuff. Anyway, every summer in America, thousands of young girls, the daughters of people who aren't all Muslim, many are Muslim, but with these bizarre cultural practices, go back to visit auntie and granny. They take them back to Yemen. They take them to Nigeria. They take them to Somalia, and they slice the clitoris off and they infibulate their vaginas. And it's a crime. It's inhumane. It's a human rights violation, and it's done by people who've come here, who bring their barbaric cultural practices and do not accept our mores. And it's been done here in America too. It's not a criminal act in many states. It's not even considered child endangerment, and it's this is not acceptable. Listen, the history of this country is people come here, they retain the things that are of value in their culture, that are acceptable to everyone, and they inculcate them in their progeny, and it carries forward. That's why the Amish are still with the Amish. The Mennonites are still the Mennonites. The old Spanish families of San Antonio and New Mexico are still the same families, even though they're Americans through and through. But these people who've been coming here, many of them for the past 30 years, have no interest in accepting our norms. It's the same problem in Canada. Their behavior is unacceptable. It's reprehensible, and they don't want to be part of fabric. They want to bring Somalia to Minnesota, like Ilhan Omar. I don't want to follow our norms. But I knew
they do that in Australia.
Oh,
they do it in Europe.
New Zealand.
They do it in New Zealand.
Italy.
Like, oh man, I couldn't think of a worse place to live than New Zealand. Like, if you want to see a society coked up on wokeism, go to New Zealand.
Oh, I've been there.
It's like the woke capital of the world. And you know my favorite thing in the world, man. Like, I don't get these people. And that is people who love their church. They're proper happy clappies, yeah? Sunday morning, every morning. Mm-hmm. Hey, we got to be there to praise the Lord. And the people that like their hunting, I go do a little bit of shooting. I see the fox, I shoot the fox. You know, those people. Then they're like, go for freedom in New Zealand. Mate, you mentioned God in New Zealand and you go to jail.
You mentioned a gun in New Zealand, they're going to in jail.
You try to go there out in the wild with the rifle because you're going to go hunting. Hey, machana. Good luck, huh?
Yeah, no.
Good luck.
New Zealand's right? And it's not just that; it's also the self-loathing of the Anglo community, who've been inculcated to think that they're somehow inferior to the Maori population because their ancestors supposedly did horrible things to the Maori. Some of that happened, but the Maori also did horrible things to the Anglo population. But no, the self-loathing and self-hatred and the supplication of Anglos in New Zealand is just ludicrous. I mean, I went there in 2011, and I thought that I was going to see a whole different set of things. Everywhere I went, almost every place name was a Maori, a Polynesian name. Very few places had Anglo names, and the way they run their story and complain about things is as if there's no Maori culture anywhere. That's total nonsense. It's everywhere. It's in everything they do. Starting with the All Blacks. Yeah.
Same as Australia.
Oh yeah. Ayers Rock is no longer Ayers Rock. You can't climb on it anymore.
You know, majority of Australia, most people don't know this because they only live in the shitty cities like Perth or Adelaide or some bullcrap. But majority of Australia actually belongs to the Aborigines. Yeah. And as a whitey, you're not allowed to go there, my friend, because that's Aborigine land. Yeah. And you can't go on the reservations. That's not okay. So, like, when they turn around and they go, it's all our country. Like,
now they fly the Aboriginal flag as if it's an official flag at government facilities and such.
Oh, at some point it's going to be.
As if it's two nations.
It's going to be.
Look, I mean, that's not an attack on Aborigines, and people who prefer that are just not paying attention. But
I don't live in Australia, so I don't have a view on it. But exactly. The point is, I live in South Africa, and you have a view on South Africa. And the point that I'm trying to make in all of this is that when you've lived abroad and you see the shit that goes on in other countries, then you look at your own country a little bit differently. And so coming back to the point that started this whole segment off, somebody said, where's the best to go to? And my answer remains,
stay home.
I live in the best place. I live in a place that's free. I can do whatever the fuck I want. And I know, it's funny. In South Africa, I know some very, very wealthy individuals that come from, freaking Brazil, and some of them come from bloody Belgium and Germany. Speak to foreigners that move to this country, and they value this place like there's no tomorrow. They will die here.
Yeah, John Jarvis is like that. Yep.
And if you try to expropriate their shit, they'll burn the place down and kill everybody, and they'll go down fighting, right? They ain't giving up shit. Do you know the people who don't value this place?
South Africans. South Africans, yeah. Yep. No, I want to address one thing in the chat real quick and then come back to something, and then we'll wrap up here shortly. The thing in the chat I want to address was someone asked me the question about female genital mutilation and transgender. No, it's not the same thing. Unless you're trying to be cheeky, I get your cheeky point, but they're not even the same thing. They're not trying to turn girls into boys. They're trying to prevent them from enjoying sex so that they're chaste. But that's what they think happens, and it's horrible. It's a cultural tradition. People claim it's an Islamic thing. That's nonsense. It has nothing to do with Islam. It is barbaric cultural practice, and that's what I say about it. Now, what I want to bring back is I knew that the United Kingdom was dead, that England was dead when it first came to light about 10 or 15 years ago. I think now it's been quite a while, that South Asians had been getting away with grooming and prostituting and sexually enslaving 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old English schoolgirls. And selling them as sex slaves all over the Midlands. And it was covered up by the police for over a decade, and over 3,000 girls were sexually trafficked in this way because the cops were afraid of being called racist if they went out and took action. Most of these girls came from broken homes or single parent families where the parents were inattentive, and so the cops just said, "Oh well, no harm, no foul." When human life, when English life was so poorly valued in the Midlands by the authorities at that time, I knew that the United Kingdom and England were on a death spiral. I mean, if you care that little about your progeny and you allow them to be traded by sex slaves by immigrants who treat them as less than human because you allow it, then you have no legitimacy as a ruling government. And that's my position on that.
Yeah, I just want to address three comments. They're going to be quick. The first one says, Valerie Cooper, Chris and Byron, you team up well together. Well, thank you. You can come again. Yeah. The next one is actually, the next comments are 2 in 1, so I'll address them together. Okay. The first is Slippery Pickle, who keeps goading me all night. So Slippery Pickle, because I keep answering your bloody questions, you better give a super chat. So it's the least you can do. It's the least you can do because I keep answering you. Okay, so he says, semi-grade to places where BE doesn't apply. Now, I'm going to answer that with the other comment to Charles Van Ozelin. Sorry, I'm butchering your name. Therefore, you should also give a super chat so I can go do Afrikaans lessons, okay? So, Charles, he says, local South Africans cannot afford to be in South Africa anymore financially. So I'm going to address both of these together.
Okay.
I'm going to call bullshit on both.
No.
And the problem is everybody understands that there's this thing here called BEE, but nobody ever bothers to look up what BEE is. I run businesses in South Africa. So let me tell you how BEE actually works. You can get a minimum BEE level of a level 4 to self-certification. You fill in a form, you go to police station, they stamp it, and you got a BEE level 4. Level 4 means that you're 100% owned by Wati, right? So you can get a level 4 BEE. So then they go, but you got to give away some equity to a black partner, right? Well, no, because you need to have a level 2. So you need to have a black partner to get government contracts.
Correct.
If you don't want to work with the government, which I don't, because you know why I don't want to? Because they don't pay you. So you don't want to work with the government anyway.
They don't have the money. They're too busy stealing the money to pay you.
They're not going to pay you. So you're going to want to work in the private sector like all the smart people. But then you get this other thing, which is when your business becomes 50 employees and above, you have to get a level 3 BE certificate, which means you got to give away some of your equity. Turnover doesn't matter, the head count. We've got 50 or more employees, got to have a level 3 BE. So you know what you do if you're smart.
Stay under 50 employees.
And then creates another company for the next 50.
Yeah.
See? Hey, smart, huh?
Yep.
Business people know this, and that's what they do.
Yep.
They call them front companies. I'm sure you've heard that phrase, yeah?
Yeah, no, I got you. The only problem you run into is you can't do some big industrial thing because you need lots of labor, and you can't pull that off.
Fine. But the people say to you that BE is a huge impediment. You're right. It is a huge impediment for what you just said, big industrial thing.
Yep.
And so if you want to work, and I want to highlight this, if you want to work in a fascist corporate environment where the rules are dictated by the state and the corporation enforces the state's rules, we used to call that fascism. Nowadays, we call it corporatism. If you want to work in a corporate environment, then what you can do is you got to go live in Europe or Australia or some other shithole where you can be a number in your company and live in the cube and do your pointless job and do fuck all. But if you want to live in Africa, and I made this comment once before on a stream, and everybody slaughtered me for it, so I'm going to elaborate it a little bit. Africa is not for pussies. If you want to live in Africa, you need to be able to be entrepreneurial, independent. You need to work in an SME. You need to be able to start your own shit. And if you can't start your own shit and do things economically, then you need to understand you're going to be a wage slave for somebody who runs in an SME, and SMEs don't typically pay very highly.
Yep.
So if you want to work in that environment, you can do great. Fantastic. If you want to work in corporatism, South Africa is not for you. But corporatism, for my soul, doesn't work. I can't be a slave to the wants and whims of the government dictates, because many times these aren't even the dictates of the business. They're dictated by the government. The government puts regulations on you. The business has to follow. But because they're so big, they're these massive, huge conglomerates, they have to follow, because what else are they going to do? Can't go out of business. They're too big to fail, right? Yeah. You've heard that phrase, right? So somebody says, what's an SME? Small medium enterprise.
Yep. Small, medium enterprise. And they had to just put it in.
If you're happy to work in that environment, which I do, I thrive in that environment. I like being entrepreneurial. I like being able to do my own shit. Everybody goes up, but BEE, you can't do that. Okay, I'm calling bullshit right now. Then everybody will say to you, you know what, Chris? There are no jobs in South Africa. White people can't get jobs. I employ people on a daily basis. Do you know how often they tell me I'm not working for that? But they'll expect a black person to work for that. But they'll be like, I'm not working for that. I'd rather stay at home and be unemployed. If you want to work, there's always a job. But what you're actually trying to say is, I am not prepared to work for that sum of money, and I would rather sit at home with a degree of entitlement going, I'm worth so much more. Says who? Says who? Because you don't live in those environments. And then that's the person who then turns around to you going, I'm going to the UK because there I can work in the corporate environment. I can live in the cubicle. I have Starbucks money. I have no freedom, but I can live with all the other Karens and it will be lovely. And I'm going there, and I'm going there for the safety of my kids. And it will be for my kids' future. Only for your fucking kids' future. It's for you. So just admit it, because you don't know what your kids' future is going to look like. No one does. The chances are it's not going to be the UK. The future that your kids inherit is not the UK that you go to. Just like with the UK I went to in 1998 is not the UK today. Yeah. So the UK you go to in 2023, not going to be the UK when they're actually 18.
Grass is not always greener. Grass is not always greener. That's the thing. Yeah, no, I know where you're coming from. I don't disagree with this. You know, it's interesting. And to take it back another way, you know, it's inside America. But I mean, I went back to where I went to high school in rural Appalachia in Ohio, southeastern Ohio, in 1987 to go back to university. I left the Army for 2 years, was in the Guard, National Guard Reserve component. And it was my 5th anniversary from high school graduation. And I saw a few people I knew from high school, but the world was small to those people. I had been overseas. I had seen all of Europe. I had served in the Army during the Cold War, and now I'm back here. And I can't even imagine. My 40th high school reunion was last year. I wouldn't even consider going back there. I drive through it occasionally when I go to Ohio, but my mother's passed away, so I have no excuse. My sister left Ohio. She's coming back now, but so I had no reason to go to Ohio. But I go back there occasionally, and I can't relate to these people. I can't go back. I mean, what I know is 1982. It's not 2023. I can't change it. But as far as, places, people should stay at home. That's why I tell people, they're always asking me for the past 3 years, not so much now, but first, especially during lockdown, should I immigrate? I said, I can't make a decision for you, but I find it very sad that you feel the need to immigrate. I understand the pressures you're under, but the grass isn't always greener.
Yeah, Chris, but here's the problem, my friend. Yeah. Like Charles just says here, again, sorry, Charles, where's my super chatter? But he says, You've come from the UK where the pound translates 20 to 1. Having lived in South Africa all my life, it's not as simplistic as you say. Yeah, you're right, Charles. You know what else you've also never experienced, my friend? You've never experienced petrol at nearly 40 Rand a litre.
Yeah.
I have.
Yeah.
Because that's what it costs in the UK.
Oh, I have too. I've paid
you know what you've also never experienced? 200 Rand to drop someone off at the drive-through at Heathrow Airport so that you can drop someone in for 5 minutes.
Yep.
I have. That's Heathrow, baby.
Yep.
You know what else you've never experienced? 120 Rand for a cafe latte from Starbucks. I have, because that's what they cost. £6 for a coffee in London.
Yep.
You know what else you've never experienced? 200 Rand for 2 chops. 2 lamb chops, 200 Rand. You've never experienced that. So what you can't do is you can't say, but everything's so cheap there. Like somehow we're the only country with forms of difficulty. Every country experiences difficulty, and the cost of living is drastically expensive regardless of what country you live in. Even the UK is expensive.
Oh, the UK
And
is
so
very
you have to
expensive.
remind yourself that when you go there, you may earn the pound, but you've got to live on the pound. And when you live on the pound, that ain't cheap. And so your expenses, your free expenses, they get reallocated in a different way. And you may say, well, at least I get free NHS. Yeah, but NHS there is like going to public hospital here. It ain't that great. But at least I don't have to pay for school fees. Yeah, but your kids have to read weird ass books and get taught weird shit that
but
you'd
have
never
to pay,
approve of.
You have to pay council
And-
fees.
And you don't get a choice on whether you're sending your kid there or not. Like that's what's going on. So you have to understand that the relevant trade-offs. Does that mean that South Africa drastically better economically than the UK? Like, come on, man. I'm not stupid. But what I'm saying to you is you have to understand everything in life is a trade-off. That's the point I'm making.
Yep.
Everything in life is a trade-off. And just remember that the trade-off isn't always in the form that you think it is. It's not just, I've got Starbucks money. That's what we say on Morning Shot. We make the joke. Everybody just wants Starbucks money. It's not just Starbucks money. It's your freedoms. It's your freedom of choice, where you get to send your kids to schooling, your culture, who you are, the fact you'll always be a foreigner. Like there's all these things. And when you start weighing all these things together, sometimes the best option is to stay home.
Yeah, no, it's always puzzled me when people talk about currencies and how, so you make this, or you're paid in the dollar, you're paid in the pound, you're paid in the euro. Yeah, but you live in the dollar, you live in the pound, live in the euro. Now, much of America was a place that was very affordable and less expensive than other places, but that's because of the size of our market. When I live in Botswana, they sell, 5 60-inch televisions every month. But the local Best Buy here sells 150 of those every month, and the one down the street sells 300. So, because of volume, prices are much cheaper, and they still make a gargantuan profit. But in small markets, you don't get that. So I never got where people came from. The only way that this works well is if you have an advantage where an exchange rate on a short-term basis is surged in your favor. Like right now, it's 18 to 1 the dollar to the rand. So right now, it's cheaper. But guess what? The prices for everything I did 6 months after I was there last time had gone up 40 to 50%. So it all came out in the wash. I spent more money in South Africa this time than I did last time because the price increases in hotels and the rentals was so much higher. And I mean, for instance, it used to cost me $100 to get a letter to cross the border from Avis. Now they charge me $176. For what? It's the same letter. It takes the same amount of time. It doesn't take them any more labor. I mean, if you want to charge them more because your labor rates went up, they didn't go up 76%. It's just getting scammed. So yeah, I've never got that with the exchange ring, and I've used every currency you can possibly imagine all around the world, the Middle East, Africa, all over Europe before they went to the euro. With drachmas and lira and kroners and everything, guilders and marks and pounds and all that stuff. And I just never got that association. People say that, if you're paid in pounds, you have to live in pounds. Now imagine how it is for us. In the military, we're paid in dollars regardless of where we live. So we've always got to deal with this exchange thing. British military, they're stationed in Germany, they get paid in pounds. Or not pounds, in euros, but they used to get paid in marks. We got paid in dollars. So when the exchange rate went against us, we couldn't do anything off post. When I was a sergeant, I made less than half what I made as a lieutenant. And as a lieutenant, I could do fewer things because the exchange rate went from 345 to the mark to 130 to the mark. And so my purchasing power declined by 200%, two-thirds, not 200%, two-thirds decline. And I couldn't do anything, even though I was making twice the salary because it was so expensive. People always look at it's grass is greener elsewhere. Look, everything has trade-offs. You have to make a decision of what you're willing to put up with, what you want. And that's back to that point. So when Afrikaners and Afrikaans speaking people move abroad to New Zealand, to Wellington, to Auckland, when they go to Australia, to Perth, or they go to Melbourne, they go to the UK. I said, you got to understand something here. You're an Afrikaner or an Afrikaans speaker now, because that's more than just the Afrikaners. But do you want to be that in the future? Because your grandkids aren't going to be that. Your kids probably aren't going to be that. They're not going to be that. It's cultural extinction. It's rare that a group of people go somewhere, and it's usually only in the early days of settlement, like the Amish and the old Spanish families in New Mexico. It isn't today. There are exceptions, but the point is that you're going to lose your identity. If you want your kids to lose their identity for an exchange, then that's an exchange you're going to make, and that's your choice. That's your choice. I mean, look, the perfect example is the Afrikaners, the Bitter Endas, who left and went to Patagonia. after the Anglo-Boer War. They don't speak Afrikaans. They all are named Alfredo and Pedro and and stuff like that. And they have
Same as Brazil, huh?
Yeah, Brazil, same thing.
Argentina.
Or Germans who went to those places, The guy who ran Paraguay was Adolfo Stroessner, the son of a Bavarian brewer. But he wasn't German. And his grandkids today don't even know German. Giselle Bündchen. I'm a proud Brazilian. You're a freaking kraut. Your name is Gisela Bündchen. You're a freaking kraut. But she doesn't know that. She thinks she's Brazilian. Anyway, so no, if that's important to you, then you are swimming against the tide of the future and swimming against the tide of history. You'll lose your culture. I'm an American. I'm of German, Danish, Norwegian, Irish, Scots, Frisian, Flemish.
Yeah, but you're still an American.
But I'm an American. That's right. That's my point. That's what I'm getting. I'm an American. First and foremost.
And I'm a fourth generation South African.
There you go.
And no matter how much I try to live in other Anglo environments, I'm still a fourth generation South African.
Well, I'm an 18th. I'm an 18th generation American, by the way. 18th. I got the Boers beat.
Yeah, you're American through and through, my friend. Like all that German speech you just gave, that's bullshit. You're an American, my friend. You're as American comes.
Oh no! Look, I mean, man, we're the OGs, man. The original gangsters. 1621. My 17th grade uncle was the first royal governor of the Jamestown colony of Virginia. That's as early as you can go back, unless you're Spanish in St. Augustine. But so that's a long time ago. Over 500 or 400, 500, 400 years ago. Excuse me, 400 years ago. My math isn't so good there. Yep. Anyway, where do Europeans come from? Africa. We all come from Africa if you believe in the theory of evolution. So my ancestors are just smart. See, let me tell you how it works, R1. About 180,000 years ago, things started getting hot on the Serengeti. And my ancestors got tired of being chased by leopards and cheetahs and like, fuck this shit, it's hot. So, the water receded because, the glaciers were expanding, the ice age. And they saw all these little stones. And they looked across to what was the Arabian Peninsula. And they said, shit, there's mountains over there. That looks nice. So they kind of like hopped across and paddled across a little space. They made it to Arabia and fuck, it's hot over here, man. This shit sucks. So they started migrating north. They got to the Levant, and it wasn't so cool. So they went to the Caucasus, and they spent so much time there knocking boots with Neanderthals that they kind of changed a bit. They got lighter complexion. They're like, this is too cold here, man. I had enough of this. The saber-toothed cats, these Neanderthals, they're not very bright. We're picking up. And they moved into Europe. And they settled Europe. And then some of them kept going north and they got lighter because there wasn't enough sunlight, And then what happens 10,000 years ago, there was a genetic mutation. And that genetic mutation brought back blue eyes, and Homo sapiens like, damn, she's hot. And they were knocking boots with all the blue-eyed chicks. And that's how we got here, man. That's how it happened. There's the history of Europe.
Interesting fact, as you mentioned, the blue eyes. So every person with blue eyes is a descendant of a Viking. Because the actual genetic mutation of the blue eye comes from Scandinavia.
That's
and the only reason it actually landed up in Europe and other parts is because the Vikings tended to conquer outwards.
And they knocked boots with everywhere they went. And they took slave girls.
Yep. And
do you know what their favorite slave girls were? Irish.
So a lot of people also don't understand this, that the Vikings tended to just disappear off the face of the planet. Well, there's a reason for that. Because the Vikings became British, because that's where they went.
Well, they became Brits, they became Normans, they became Sicilians, they became Carthaginians, they became what's Constantinopolians, I guess if you want to use that term, and they became Russians. The Vikings founded Kievan Rus, which is the origins of the Russian Empire and modern Russia. The Vikings did it because they sailed down the rivers. And anyway, so the Vikings, man. So the OGs. That's right, my ancestors.
100%. And so it's very interesting to sometimes think about that, because you have to think, we all came from Viking ancestry. These guys, they fought in wars. We've all seen the movies. Hey, these guys were hardcore, right?
Yep.
Here they are. How many thousands of years later? They're like, I need Starbucks money. So I need to go to some corporatism because I need some Starbucks money. And I can't look after myself. And I know my ancestors were all fearsome warriors. They were all killing everybody, raping and pillaging and going along. But I need some Starbucks money. Amen. I'll tell you. I sometimes look at my own people and I just think to myself, like, what happened?
Yeah,
I don't know.
something happened on the way to the forum. Something went terribly wrong there. Anyway, so Charles says, you got Starbucks money already, Byron. Yeah, but the super chat comes to me, Charles, not to Byron. So anyway.
Yeah. Where's that super chat, dude? Like, I answered all your questions. Yes, man.
Anyway.
Can't even give us a R5 super chat. Yeah.
I've never got a 5 rand super chat. I didn't even know you could go that low. I know you can do 11, but I've never got a 5. So, but yeah.
Where is super chat? It's the little monetary symbol which is underneath the chat thing that you're typing in. You see, it looks like a little dollar sign there.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why there's a dollar sign. The dollar's not really worth anything anymore.
Oh, please!
I believe it's now cheaper than toilet paper. So what people tend to do these days is wipe their backsides with the dollar.
We are parity with the euro. We are close to parity with the pound, down to 130 something, and we are at 18-1 to the rand. So toilet paper. Now the value of the dollar, like every other currency, has gone to shit because of Biden inflation and his macroeconomic policies have destroyed the world. But anyway.
Leader of the free world, that one. So if for the 73 people watching, Morning Shot has a channel called Morning Shot International. We cover some international news. We don't do a lot of videos, but this week I did a video on Biden, and I did draw some references between Biden and a very famous other leader in the world, which is a former Russian leader, and he's the guy who you may recall was actually the death of the Soviet Union. It's the last Soviet leader. No, the one who came after him.
Boris Yeltsin?
Yeltsin.
Yeah, well, he was the leader of Russia, not Soviet Union, but yeah, Boris Yeltsin.
Yeah. So I draw reference to the fact that, as far as I'm concerned, Donald Trump is Gorbachev, Joe Biden is Yeltsin. And the problem is that when Yeltsin destroyed what was left of the former Soviet Union, the idea of communism died with him. Like in Russia, no one was interested in the Chinese Communist Party. Sorry, not the Chinese Communist, the Russian Communist Party. And even today, it's not even a blip on the radar. It has no power. No one's interested in it. It died because of that guy. Now, why did it die because of that guy? Well, because he was often absent-minded. He was often drunk. He often didn't have a clue what was going on. He put in some policies that everybody thought were like batshit crazy. And the problem is it undermined communism in Russia to a degree where communism isn't really a thing in Russia anymore. Maybe they've rebranded it as something else, but it's not really a thing. And so to talk of communism in Russia is not really a topic. And my concern for your country specifically is that Joe Biden, he doesn't just represent America. He represents the ideals that America stands for. Freedom, liberty, capitalism, the ability to just get on and do things, all the things that made your nation great, like First Amendment, Second Amendment. The concern becomes like your guys, he's just fucked in the head, man. So like the problem is it's easy now for people like Chi to go, you don't want an American type system, because the American type system, you don't want that because you'll end up with Joe Biden. You don't want a Joe Biden, right? You want a Chi, so you must have our system. So it undermines the system that he's meant to represent. And that's the risk that your chappie has right now.
Yeah, no, it's not just the system, the justice system here. There's no confidence in it. There's no confidence in our economic policy. There's no confidence in our foreign policy. Yeah, and this guy has done more to damage America than any president in history. It's shocking where we're at. No, Swanepoel is a Dutch name. He mentioned that the guy married a woman named Sachs, which is German. Yeah, Swanepoel is Dutch. That's not you don't get German surnames with the P-O-E unless it's an Anglicization of the O with the umlaut on it. But Swanepoel is a very Dutch name. Someone was asking a question. Yeah, well, gosh, it's Easter weekend, and so I guess we've turned this into a much more interesting and longer conversation than I think we started. And we've still got quite a big audience here, but we probably ought to wrap it up. We're approaching 3 hours. You're going to get a reputation for being like me. I mean, I used to do 3-hour live streams every day back when my channel was surging. But
yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. Like once in a while, okay.
Yeah.
Lucky I don't have to go to work tomorrow.
Yeah, well, it's Easter weekend. So are you enjoying Easter at home then, or is that the deal?
I've got some things to do on the property.
Kill some sheep.
Some horses to ride. The usual stupid.
Some rifles to sling. So.
Usual stuff.
Usual stuff. Anyway, all right. Well, thanks everybody for watching. Really appreciate it. And Byron, thanks a lot for joining me for this. And for those of you who were patient and waited while Byron had to take care of some business, thank you for that. I hope that you found my answers to your questions interesting in that brief interregnum that we had there.
Hey, I made up for it, huh?
Oh,
I made up for it. Look, 3 hours and something. Come on, man.
Yeah, 2:43, but close to 3 hours. But yeah, no, thanks a lot, Byron. We'll catch you next time. And also thanks for the explanation when people were asking the questions about, why they're getting emails from DearSA. They were confused on that because I didn't have an answer on it. So I was glad that you were able to fill in there and explain that. Any final thoughts? Anything, it's all here. Oh, by the way, did you see, where's it? Hang on. Did you see my cap? I was inspired by Juju, and so I now have one of these. So there you go. So,
oh, lovely.
Yeah,
lovely.
So, this is the closest I could find to a red Teletubby. It's the mascot for the 2019 World Cup in Japan.
Oh, awesome. I'll see if I can get you a Juju hat. The only problem is Ramon might have crapped in it first, but I'm sure that'll be fun.
That doesn't surprise me. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, so to everybody who's going into Easter, happy Easter, everybody. Let's all remind ourselves what the day is for. It's all for the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. It is a Christian holiday. Please don't think otherwise. Very interesting question, just for some theological training. For those of you who don't know, I have a master's in theology. Hey, everybody has a degree, always wants to slip it in the conversation. Eh? But the interesting idea is that Jesus died, obviously, as you know, on a Friday, and rested on a Saturday and came back on a Sunday. So his lag time was like a weekend, his respawn weekend time. Actually, there's a theological reason for it, just so that people know, just for some trivia, because it's nice to talk about trivia. It's a weekend, it's a religious holiday. And the trivia is that according to Judaism, it is forbidden to work on the seventh day. Yeah. And the seventh day starts at the end of Sunday. So when the sun goes down on Friday until the sun goes down on Saturday, that is the Sabbath. Mm-hmm. So when the sun goes down on Friday to the sun going down on Saturday, that's your Sunday.
And that's why Jesus couldn't come back.
Sunday is the new day. It's the new Monday. Okay? So when the sun goes down on Saturday evening, that becomes Sunday. So Jesus died in the afternoon of Friday. Then it got dark. Now it's forbidden to work on the Sabbath. So he remained dead in the tomb from Friday evening until Saturday evening, where that Saturday evening becomes the new Sunday. On the new Sunday, Saturday to Sunday, Jesus rose. Now, you may ask yourself why. Why is this? And lots of people don't understand because we don't teach this shit anymore. But there's a reason for it. That's because according to Genesis 1, God created the world in 7 days. On the seventh day, he rested. So creation number 1, the first creation, ended on the seventh day. Jesus terminated the first creation and recreated creation when he resurrected on the next thing. How do I know this? Because Paul says it in the epistles. Paul says in Jesus, we have a new creation. We have a new creation of humanity. Everything is made anew. Everything's made anew by the blood of Jesus because all of the original sin in the first creation is gone. Now we live in the new creation. So we live in the new times, the new 7 days. We don't know when the rest period will be because we don't know. Okay, but that's the basic idea. So that's why he was resurrected on the Sunday, because the new Sunday is the new week. So imagine that the first week was until he died. Now we're in week 2. See? So he came back on week 2. That was the basic idea. All of the Jews understood this because it's all part of their religion. Modern times, we don't really talk about it. So on Sunday, just remember, meant to follow the Sabbath. The Sabbath is don't do anything. Have a nice time. Do for call, just like God. He didn't even resurrect. Spawn time was a weekend. So have a nice weekend. Do for call. Don't work at all. And when it comes through to Saturday evening to Sunday, remember, new creation, new week. Set some new goals for yourself for the year. Try achieve some new things. Do some great things in life. Other than that, I wish you all a great time. Wish you all to have a lovely Easter. And if you haven't already, write, like, share, subscribe, all the usual bullshit that YouTube tells you to do.
Cool beans. Byron Shepherd, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Happy Easter to you and yours. And may you have a peaceful, lovely weekend. And we'll chat later next week. Thanks a lot, Byron.
Take it easy.
All right, I'll let you drop off and then I'll wrap up. All right, folks, there you go. It's been a while since we've had a long live stream like this, but there you go, 2 hours and 48 minutes. Thank you all so much for sticking with us. And yeah, my five pence, he did explain that very well, but as was also mentioned here, there's a pagan aspect to this as well. And then Fleshin is giving us his Welsh Happy Easter. Thank you for that, for sharing the Welsh version of it. Appreciate that. But thanks everybody for tuning in. It's been pretty epic. We've been over 60 people since 20 minutes into the broadcast, so that's pretty cool. And we peaked at 76 in the stream. So thank you all very much. Not bad for a late show. I got to get going. It would collect my mail before they close down. So thank you all so much. And tomorrow, I don't know if I'll do news. I'll consider it. It's Good Friday. I'll consider whether I'm going to do it or not. But I will definitely be doing the rugby broadcast on Rugby Ascent. It's got 2 games tomorrow. We got the Bulls and Griquas at Loftus Versfeld, and then we've got the Sharks and Pumas, and so that's coming up at Kings Park. That's tomorrow. Those 2 games for sure on Rugby Ascendant. You can tune in, listen to live commentary and play-by-play, and thank you for that. Leovin just gave a super chat, 140 Rand, says, Danke Chris. It's my pleasure, Leovin. Thank you for that. There it is. Finally, it came up. And with that, we're going to wrap it up. Thanks, everybody. This was the inaugural Braai Brus. I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to leave a comment behind on the video after the fact if you enjoyed it and if you want to see more of this. Paulie wasn't here. A bit surprised. He's the one that really wanted to see this sort of thing. So thank you all so much. And we'll catch you on Rugby Ascendant tomorrow. It's an epic having you all here. I've really enjoyed it. Take care of yourselves, folks, and have a lovely evening. Be safe this weekend and enjoy your Easter holiday. Thank you so much. Cheers.